Part 38. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 372. Yang Yuru was chatting, and now her face, which was red and swollen from being beaten, showed a serious and stubborn look. It was in private, and she was not doing it for the sake of beauty when her cheeks were showing slap marks. Chu Yunyang was willing to joke with her, but now seeing the way she was describing the embarrassment, in front of so many people, Yang Yuru's words were obviously meant to defeat Chu Yunyang's army, and Chu Yunyang couldn't bear it. He curled his lips and laughed, a fierce light flashed in his eyes. "Mr. Yang?" "The daughter of Yang Huan, the Minister of Household Affairs." Chu Yunyang still had a smile on his face at this moment, but his eyes were completely gloomy. Lily had just stirred up anger, and now he was watching with cold eyes. When he saw Su holding her belly on the side, she deliberately said, "The daughter of the Minister of the Ministry of Finance. The father of Sister Defei is not the Minister of the Ministry of Finance." No wonder he was so anxious to speak for her just now. "You are such a mouthful." Ms. Su herself could point fingers at Sang and Huai, but now she became anxious and said categorically, "I have never known each other. If you tell any lies, it's scheduled to be struck by lightning that day." For such a trivial matter, Sister Defei actually swore such a heavy oath. Why should she take it so seriously? Lily couldn't help but laugh. It was better that she didn't say this or smile. So she was already angry in her heart. After she got pregnant, Chu Yunyang no longer doted on her as before, but often doted on Lily. Sue's temper had been very hot recently due to her anxiety. Now that she was being teased by Lily again, seeing the sarcastic smile on her face, she just felt, he was so angry that his eyes turned black, his chest felt sweet, and he almost spurted out a mouthful of blood. Concubine Xian stood aside and didn't dare to say anything. Naturally, she didn't like Lily, but Lily was too powerful in the palace now. She can't afford to offend. He didn't want to lose face in front of Chu Yunyang. So he stood aside and watched Sushi fight with Lily, then squeezed his way to Chu Yunyang without leaving a trace, took out a fan and shook it, hoping to send his fragrance to Chu Yunyang so that he would pay more attention to him. A bit. Okay, it's fun for a woman to be jealous occasionally, but Chu Yunyang wouldn't like it if she caused a scene in public and lost her dignity. His expression turned cold, but the corners of his ruthless mouth curled up. He glared at Lily and then at Sushi and said, "My beloved concubine has always been generous and considerate. You should know that your concubine has such a delicate temperament." Chu Yunyang's words were gentle and comforting, but Sushi felt as if she had chewed yellow lotus in her heart. Just because Guo Bei had always been domineering and willful, so he, who knew the general situation, should let her go? Although Lily was the second most respected person in terms of position, Sushi was pregnant now, so she might not have thought about the position in the middle palace. However, Chu Yunyang seemed to be praising him on the surface, but in reality he was defending Lily in every possible way. My heart hurt like a knife. Lily, however, did not accept Chu Yunyang's sentiments, and turned her head away with a sneer. There was such a fuss in today's draft. After seeing enough of Yang Yuru's jokes, Lily came because of her in the first place. Lily had no interest in staying any longer. Although it was already mid-August, Kaiuhu's power should not be underestimated. He stood for a while. The sun made her dizzy and dizzy. Guo Bei's body had been severely damaged for many years since she had been in the palace. She had palace people around her every day these days, so she couldn't practice martial arts. Therefore, although she brought her own attribute values, her body was, even if a healthy person feels like fainting at the moment, she will not actually faint, but she can feel the dizzy and uncomfortable feeling. She found an excuse and ran away. Regardless of the mess she had left after having someone beat up Yang Yuru, Lily directly confessed to Chu Yunyang and got on the chariot to leave. At noon, she went back to the palace to take a nap. When the people guarding the imperial garden came back, they reported to her what brands the emperor had left and what titles he had registered. As expected by Lily, it was Yang Yuru who had such a problem today. She was older and uglier, but she was still registered as a talent. Just like in the plot, she was given the title of a talented person. Although the status of a 5th-grade talented person was not high, compared with others who entered the palace, for some girls who couldn't even get the lowest rank, Yang Yuru was already very good. Not to mention that Lily gave her a blow today. I originally thought that even if Chu Yunyang didn't dislike her, he would dislike her. Yes, I didn't expect that she was capable and could still be registered as a talented person. I heard that concubine interceded for her and asked her to write a poem in front of the emperor, so that the emperor would look at her differently. Fulio squeezed Lily's shoulders and reported to her in a low voice the scene of today's draft. When it was mentioned that Yang Yuru composed a poem, Lily couldn't help but laugh. I never thought that Yang Karen has the talent of number 1 and can compose poems. I'll have to take a closer look next time. In the original plot, Yang Yuru was supposed to keep a low profile after entering the palace, until she accidentally met Chu Yunyang. In private, she showed her cute and playful side, and was dignified and elegant at times, and could recite poems. She was slowly admired by Chu Yunyang. First fell in love with her lovely and frank character, who could be both charming and naive, then fell in love with her talent, and finally doted on her and deposed Guo Gaifei. But Yang Yuru actually showed her poetry so early, and was frank today. Her side was seen early again, so that although she was in the limelight and allowed Chu Yunyang to remember her, she also lost the opportunity. Who knows that she has revealed so much about herself now, and will she keep her secret in the future? When she meets Chu Yunyang again down there, what will she pay for? While he was talking, a servant from outside hurriedly came in and replied, "Your Majesty, those cheap hooves who just entered the palace today stayed up all night and broke the lotus flowers in the imperial garden. Now the lights are put on." Although the emperor's harem was said to have 3,000 beauties, in fact, Chu Yunyang's palace even counted the maids, which probably numbered in the tens of thousands. With too many monks and too little food, many women had no choice but to find other ways to do it. It was not uncommon to put up lotus lanterns. Many palace people would always sneak out of the palace, trying every means to attract the emperor's attention. This matter of putting lotus lanterns has been happening in the palace since ancient times. There are some low-ranking people in the palace who may never see Chu in their lifetime. Women on the Yunyang side would compose some boudoir poems and insert them into the poems. Once seen by the emperor, if they were lucky, they might even be favored. Although not many people succeeded in this method, there were always people who enjoyed it. The most ingenious thing is that Yang Yuru also did this in the plot, but she did not put anything in the lotus lantern, nor did she write about her sorrow. Instead, she just wrote a very majestic sentence on the petals: "The sparrow knows the ambition of the swan." It happened that Chu Yunyang had someone fish out a few lanterns. After he was tired of seeing the brocade handkerchiefs hidden in the lanterns and what he wrote about his daughter's family's thoughts, seeing such verses again was like eating greasy meat and feeling refreshed. The delicious side dishes that accompany rice are astonishing. Lily couldn't help but sneer when she heard the chamberlain say that a group of newly arrived maids gathered to put out lanterns. Fu Feng took a comb to untie Lily's hair. Seeing the smile on Lily's lips, she said, "These hooves are going crazy trying to seduce the emperor. They even want to run away even though they haven't learned how to walk. Madam, why don't you lead some people to drive them away?" "No need, let them put the lights on." Lily took the armor sheath in her hands slowly, while rubbing her fingers that had some marks from wearing the armor. She chuckled and said, "Let them put it on. People have locked the gates of each palace and no one is allowed to go in or out. They like to stay in the imperial garden, so they can stay there all night." After saying this, Lily yawned and stood up. "Let me write down all the names of the people who put the lanterns. Early tomorrow morning, let them find a way to fish everything out of the river. If it sinks into the pond, damn it, let them find a way to clean it up. If I go into the Imperial Garden tomorrow and see any dissatisfaction, don't blame me for being ruthless. Guo Beihe in the plot is stupid. When she heard Yang Yuru and others setting off lanterns, he sent people to drive them away. Not only did he leave a reputation for being mean and cruel, but in the end he didn't take advantage of her at all, and she didn't give anything to her. These new women who have entered the palace have caused real harm, which can be regarded as stealing a chicken but losing a lot of rice. Lily does not use rough methods to deal with people. After giving orders now, she heard the servant reply that Chu Yunyang had turned over a G today. Yu, after washing herself, was waited on by the palace maid and went back to the palace to sleep. When she woke up early the next morning, Fuyu twisted a handkerchief and wiped Lily's face while holding back a smile. Your Majesty, last night the group of new arrivals stayed in the Imperial Garden all night. When they were about to go back early this morning, they listened to Your Majesty's instructions and took the lanterns they had put down last night. There was a strong wind at night in autumn, and the lantern was blown everywhere. The Emperor summoned a beauty to attend his bed yesterday, and with the warm and fragrant nephrite in his arms all night, he had no time to wander outside to look for lotus lanterns, so Yang Yuru and others, a group of people, wasted a lot of effort, and their charming eyes were really thrown to a blind man. After staying out all night, they had to fish it out in the harem early this morning before they had time to wash up. After hearing this, Beihe couldn't help laughing. She had nothing to do in the harem. Today, with such an interesting incident, Guo Beihe's reputation has long been ruined. Now Beihe is not going to be a good person. And this situation was caused by herself. She naturally wanted to go out and join in the fun, allowing Fu Feng and others to tidy up and dress up properly. She also saw a group of concubines who came to greet them, so Lily sent these people away and took a ride. He walked towards the Imperial Garden on foot. Su and others who had not left behind were twisting their handkerchiefs and cursing, "Look how arrogant she can be." The Imperial Garden was now in a mess. A group of beauties who usually looked charming were all lying on the jade railings in a very embarrassed state. Almost everyone had a piece of money in their hands, bending down to fish it out. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 373. When the lotus lanterns were put out last night, the water was good, the people were good, the moon was good, and the wine was not intoxicating, but the scenery was already intoxicating. However, when it was time to salvage the lotus lanterns during the day, it was not so wonderful. Last night, after the wind blew the candles and burned them, most of the lotus flowers are withered, and there are a lot of handkerchiefs and silk papers inside. They are either floating on the river or sinking to the bottom of the water. If it's on the river surface, even if it's farther away, it's okay to find a way to find a bamboo pole to stick to. But if it sinks to the bottom of the river, you have to swim under the water to get it. Those who have titles and positions are registered. It's just a talented person, and there is a palace maid at his side. If there is no new member of the palace, he can only find his own way to salvage it. For a while, there are only a few people around the river, and everyone is staring at him in confusion. Looking into the river, the wind last night caused the lotus lanterns to float in all directions. Now some of them have drifted very far away. Occasionally, you can still find a few scattered along the river bank. When Lily went out on the chariot, she saw groups of girls, all of them clinging to each other with sad faces or dull eyes, looking very miserable. But Lily couldn't feel any sympathy in her heart at the moment. Anyway, all she had to do in this mission was to be a villain, so bad that it made people grind their teeth, but it felt so satisfying that people couldn't do anything about her. When Lily came along the road, many people even cursed her in their hearts, but when they saw her walking by, they still had to kneel on the ground and call her Empress, wandering around in a circle until they came to a group of girls last night. When the source of the lanterns was released, several girls were hugging each other and crying. Go and have a look. Why are you crying? It's not like your parents are dead. Bad luck. Lily didn't even raise her head. The small basket placed next to her chariot was neatly filled with fresh summer melons and fruits, which had been cut and arranged neatly by the waiter. She took a silver skewer and forked them together, and was impatient when she heard the whimpering sound. He waved his hand. Fuyao took the order and went forward. The crying over there stopped. A group of girls stood up tremblingly. They all walked towards the side with their heads lowered like frost-beaten eggplants. Only one person held his head high. The busty one walked seriously and proudly. Lily saw Yang Yuru's figure from the corner of her eye, and her brows trembled. My slaves have seen the noble concubine, may she be blessed with peace and prosperity. A group of girls shouted in unison, and the voices were as delicate as the others, but Yang Yuru stood upright among them, her body erect. Your Majesty, this slave is not convinced. She had said the same thing yesterday when she entered the palace for the draft. She was beaten but did not remember it. Lily sneered twice and ate another piece of pear before wiping her mouth with a handkerchief. No sound was made. A flash of anger flashed across Yang Yuru's face, and she said seriously. Last night, the Empress suddenly ordered the palace door to be locked. The slaves and others had no place to rest. Sister Chiu was even more weak and suffered from the cold. What if someone died? Now the Empress still wants the slaves to clean up the lotus pond. God, isn't there such a royal law yet? The slaves are also ordered into the palace by the Emperor himself. They are the Emperor's wives, not the slaves in the palace. In the plot, it is said that she is willing to have the same person, stay together forever, and is not willing to compete with a group of women for her husband. The aloof and refined Yang Yuru was forced to become anxious now, and she also began to admit that she was one of Chu Yunyang's concubines. A person, who is out of the ordinary world, just has food to eat, clothes to wear, and moans without illness. Lily sneered twice, then held the mouthkerchief in her hand and threw it at Yang Yuru. She curled the corner of her mouth and said softly, "Talk to me about the king's law. Why don't you look at me? This palace is not your family's courtyard. There is a curfew at night, but you are still allowed to walk around and put out lotus lanterns. You want to see me? Emperor? Yes, I don't care, but you are naturally responsible for cleaning up the lotus pond. Now that the middle palace has no owner, I am in charge of the harem. What you say will work. It is the law." After Lily said this arrogantly, Yang Yuru was so angry that she trembled all over and clenched her hands tightly. Her lips moved. Before she could speak, Lily lazily covered her eyes with her hands. "The sun is getting louder. Let's go back to the palace. Yang Karen contradicted me and made me kneel for 2 hours. I won't get up before the time." After saying this, Lily didn't even look at Yang Yuru and laughed softly. "Yang Karen, I won't slap you in the face this time, but you must take advantage of the grace given to you." She came out just to torture Yang Karen to vent her anger for the original owner. When Lily slapped Yang Yuru yesterday, she found out that she tortured Yang Yuru once, and the original owner felt happy for no reason. Anyway, in the end result, she would definitely suppress Yang Yuru. Darling, even if Chu Yunyang couldn't stand her arrogant attitude and killed her in the end, as long as he dragged Yang Karen to die together before his death, the mission would be completed, and he would give her some hardships in the process, which would satisfy the original owner and make her happy. It can make Turtle feel bad in his heart since he went on many missions. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? As soon as Lily left, a group of girls couldn't help but shed tears. Yang Yuru knelt straight on the ground. Several people gathered around her with sad faces to persuade her, but she said stubbornly, "I don't believe there is no king's law in this world. My father said that good people will eventually be rewarded. I have heard that concubine Guo is public and fierce. I didn't expect that being famous is not as good as meeting her. She is in charge of the power of the harem, and her words are effective. One day, I will do it too. Her eyes gradually showed ambition. At first, Yang Yuru felt that she did not envy the wealth and honor above her head, and there was no need to compete with a group of women for men. After all, she longed for the ordinary life of a monogamous couple. She only wanted to be alone in the palace until she grew old, but she didn't expect that she would be bullied by others, or ridiculed by others. Today, Lily slapped her in the face like this, letting her taste the benefits of power, and she wanted to fight for it. What's not to fight for? She is also one of Chu Yunyang's wives. She not only wants to fight, but also wants to stand in a higher position than Lily one day. Then she will be like her, let her kneel in front of him, and return to the harem. Everyone is quiet, let all women be equal. Behi felt extremely relieved after letting go of the evil in her heart. In addition to scheming people, Guo Behi's past life was only about appearance. She would be infinitely satisfied when she went out for a walk every day and saw people's envious, jealous, and frightened eyes. Lily entered after taking her body, he also inherited her hobby. Everything she did every day made the girls in the harem gnash their teeth and curse. Today, the imperial concubine cruelly locked up a group of women to spend the night in the imperial garden, and made many of them so fragile that they could not sleep at night. It didn't take long for the news that Liangku was suffering from the cold to spread throughout the harem. The medical ladies almost broke their legs. Naturally, some people who suffered from the cold could no longer stay in bed, but when the illness recovered, the emperor would probably they forgot that everyone thought Lily wanted to use this trick to get rid of the new Cainv who entered the palace. When everyone mentioned Lily, they couldn't help but call her a poisonous woman. The Guo family was naturally offended by Lily's involvement. In the past, many people formed cliques with the Guo family for personal gain, but due to the nastiness among a group of women, it slowly collapsed. It's just that Lily didn't think about what would happen next. After bullying Yang Yuru, she returned to the palace. Later, Chu Yunyang entered the harem after going to court and saw the wailing in the palace. She found someone to investigate. After knowing what Lily had done, instead of being angry, he laughed. He ignored Yang Yuru who was kneeling in the sun like a pole, and instead headed towards Zikan Palace. Since then, there have been fewer people putting up lotus lanterns in the palace, and everyone has scolded Lily even more fiercely behind her back, but on the surface everything is calm. Different from the situation where the new maids who entered the palace secretly cursed Lily, the eunuchs who were responsible for sweeping the imperial garden were somewhat grateful to Lily, and the concubine also felt that this move was very satisfying. Only Su, who was pregnant, cursed coldly. Cat. For half a month, the emperor only summoned 2 new girls who entered the palace. The rest of the time they either slept at Lily's place or were alone. There were many people in the harem who wanted to get ahead. Although Yang Yuru had vowed to trample Lily before. At his feet, Chu Yunyang had no intention of summoning her. Only then did Yang Yuru realize that her previous thoughts were a bit naive. What about being a pair for life, and why she didn't want to be one of the emperor's many women? Her thoughts were good. But someone needs to cooperate. Now that the emperor doesn't show up, she can't even be one of the women who wants to become the emperor. She was not a contented mistress. After staying in the side hall for 2 days, she felt a little bored. Her character was originally stubborn and lively, so she couldn't stay in a boring place like the palace. Very unaccustomed, when the nanny in the palace was teaching the rules, she suddenly mentioned the Tai Chi hall where the emperor lived and worked on weekdays. Yang Yuru immediately paid attention to it. In the evening, Chu Yunyang sent someone to pass a message saying that if Lily's brand was ordered tonight, he would have someone carry Lily over. Unexpectedly, Lily was already being washed and neatly washed by someone. On the way, he met Chu Yunyang's chamberlain. Eunuch Huang sent a message with a bitter look on his face, saying that the emperor suddenly had something else to do today and asked the imperial concubine to go back. Lily had no idea what kind of person Chu Yunyang was. She sneered twice and ignored Eunuch Huang, who was wiping his sweat with worry. She glanced at Fu Feng and said, "Go and ask around. The emperor is summoning you again tonight." Who? Hearing these words, Eunuch Wang's forehead broke out in cold sweat. In front of him, the emperor's personal manager, he dared to inquire about Chu Yunyang's whereabouts. Apart from Guo Gaifei, who was acting increasingly high profile, there was no other person. But no one could guess the emperor's thoughts. Eunuch Huang hesitated for a moment, stamped his feet, and said anxiously, "My dear old slave, isn't this going to embarrass my old slave?" To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 374. I don't want to embarrass you, but someone clearly wants to embarrass me. I'm not afraid to tell you. If it's someone else, forget it. I'll turn around and leave today, but if it's Yang Karen. Lily will. The tone became longer, which frightened Eunuch Huang. Then she pursed her lips and smiled, "Then I'm really not happy." Although he doesn't care about serving Chu Yunyang's bed, to be honest, except for concubines Sudef and Yang Karen, no one in the harem dares to blatantly go against Lily. At this time, concubine Desu is pregnant with Liujia. It is impossible to sleep with him. If the other eunuch Huang is already an old man in the palace, Lily will definitely have clues when he asks him. Although there is no definite admission, judging from his wry smile, Lily already has it in her heart. Number. To tell you the truth, the one who is in Ganlin Palace today is indeed the master. Please calm down, please. Seeing that Lily had guessed it, Eunuch Huang sighed and flicked the fly whisk in his hand. The emperor is leaving. It's unwelcome. Now that the old slave has finished his errand, he doesn't dare to stop the queen from walking. Lily sneered and glanced in the direction of Ganlin Palace, then waved, "Give Eunuch Huang some face." The chariot was lifted up again, and when they returned to the palace, the news that concubine Guo was slapped in the face by the emperor tonight and went back was probably spread early tomorrow morning. No one in the palace had slept well, and some were excited. Some people are happy, and some are also sour. After all, the emperor has a favored woman, and she can still overwhelm the imperial concubine. It can be seen that she will be a powerful enemy for everyone in the harem in the future. Lily didn't get up until daybreak. A group of women outside had arrived early, probably waiting to see her smile. Lily slept well last night. It was only a matter of time before Yang Yuru accepted the favor. She was not as sincere towards Chu Yunyang as the original owner. It didn't hurt her whether Chu Yunyang doted on Yang Yuru or not. Fuliu had a gloomy face and twisted a handkerchief to clean Lily's face. My queen didn't see it. Everyone in that group of people was laughing like they were laughing. Humph. The queen will take care of them later. Fu Feng found some clothes for Lily to put on. Although it has been late autumn in the past few days, the power of the autumn tiger is still there. The sun has been very bright these 2 days, and Lily has worn it. Wearing a floor-length pink gauze skirt. Her breasts were worn with a light-colored tube top and a thin, wide-sleeved top. The two girls quickly combed her hair. They did not do any extra dressing. They only wore her hair in a bun and a pendant, and her eyebrows were just the silver bone mother-in-law was attached, and when Lily packed up and left the inner hall, even though the group of women wanted to see Lily's excitement, they saw her looking radiant. But all of them were speechless. Today, even concubine Su, who was raising her baby at home peacefully, came, although a group of women thought that the biggest victim last night should be Lily. But at this moment, even if everyone is wearing thick makeup, they can't hide the beauty on their faces, especially Su, who is already quite old. In addition, she is pregnant with Liujia, so her face looks very tired and lifeless. which adds a bit of haggardness, but Lily is the most outstanding one among them. Everyone has come so well today. Yesterday, Yang Karen attended the bed. Is Yang Karen here? Although the hall was full of people, Yang Yuru was not there. Lily glanced around with a smile on her face, and suddenly her expression changed. He sank down, reached out, and patted the small table in his hand hard, and said sternly, "Yang Karen is so courageous." After sleeping with him, he turned out to be pampered and pampered. Everyone had long expected that she would be angry with Yang Yuru. After all, although yesterday's incident had only happened not long ago, it had already spread throughout the palace. But although they guessed that Lily would attack, everyone did not expect that Lily would start to attack so quickly without any regard for face. "Sister, please calm down, maybe Yang Karen is unwell." Mrso pursed her lips and smiled, then coughed twice. After all, sister has been through it all. There was a hint of ridicule in her eyes, and she took half a face. Covering her mouth with her sleeves, even though she couldn't see the lower half of her face clearly, Lily could also imagine what she looked like at this moment. Humph. It's a refreshing autumn day today. Why don't you sisters go out for a walk with me? Fu Feng, go find someone to call Yang Karen out. Lily did not answer Sue's words, but instead invited everyone to go out for a walk together. So she didn't want to go out together, because she was afraid that Lily would do something dirty. She had always disliked Lily's behavior. Now she heard that she wanted to call Yang Yuru out again. She thought of her father and Yang Yuru's father. They both belong to the same household department, and both parties should be on the same page. If she is lucky, she will give birth to a son who will gain more influence in the palace. Therefore, she wants to befriend Yang Yuru. Mrsu snorted coldly and followed suit. Go up. The sun had already risen high when Beihe and others were sitting in the imperial garden. When Fu Feng led the people to pull Yang Yuru over, she was still sleeping. She was disheveled at the moment and only had a coat on her body. Her hair was still disheveled and looked haggard. It was obvious that someone had pulled him out of bed. Su frowned, feeling that Lily was very mean. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Lily talking to concubine Xian. Yang Yuru was being pulled to kneel outside. The cool breeze blew slowly in the pavilion, and there was a tile covering her head. Of course, the sun is not exposed to the sun. Poor Yang Karen outside, who originally came from an official family, knelt in the sun and his face turned red in a short time. Is this act of sister too mean? So she endured it again and again. Seeing that no one seemed to notice Yang Karen's situation, she saw Yang Yuru straightening her waist and kneeling with a stubborn look on her face, and she couldn't help but feeling a bit of sympathy for each other. I finally couldn't hold back and said, "They are all serving the emperor." As soon as she finished speaking, someone pointed not far away and shouted, "The emperor is here." Yang Yuru, who had been kneeling in a cold sweat just now but gritted her teeth to hold it back, trembled when she heard this. After shaking for a while, she suddenly fell limply to the ground. Lily stood up and looked at Yang Yuru's delicate and timid appearance. She puffed up her chest and walked out of the pavilion. When she passed by Yang Yuru, she stepped on her palm. Yang Yuru's body trembled under her feet. His eyelids trembled, but he held on and did not wake up. Before, she could grit her teeth and pretend to faint when the emperor came. Since she didn't shout, Lily pretended not to notice and stepped on her hand without moving away. "Your Majesty, may you be blessed." Chu Yunyang came closer, and Lily gave him a blessing salute. Even if a group of palace concubines behind him wanted to come forward, they did not dare to move under Lily's momentum. Yunyang reached out to help Lily stand up, and put his arm around her waist. Just when he was about to bring her into his arms, Lily suddenly stamped her feet. "Your Majesty." Ever since Guo Beihe changed someone, she has never acted like a coquettish person. A coquettish look flashed in Chu Yunyang's eyes. Naturally, he also saw Yang Yuru lying on the ground. He also did not miss the sound of Lily gritting her teeth while stamping her feet and the sounds on the ground. Yang Yuru's trembling eyelashes, Chu Yunyang knew these tricks in the harem, but he had no intention of exposing them. He took Lily's hand and laughed softly. What was my concubine talking about before, so lively? Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Yang Yuru, who was unconscious on the ground, originally wanted to wait until Chu Yunyang came and found herself unconscious on the ground and asked him. Unexpectedly, Chu Yunyang pretended not to see her, and Lily was very vicious. He stepped on her hand and chopped it twice hard just now. Now the back of her hand was so painful that it was already a little numb. Tears flashed in Yang Yuru's eyes, and she couldn't help pretending to have just woken up. He timidly called Chu Yunyang. What's going on? Chu Yunyang did not pull the pale-faced Yang Yuru, but touched Lily's hair. Although Yang Yuru was beautiful, the most indispensable thing in the palace was beauties, those prettier than her. There are too many to count, even Guo Beihi's body is much better than hers. In addition, Beihi seems to have changed a person recently. Chu Yunyang is in a rare moment, so naturally he can no longer focus on Yang Yuru. Yang Karen went to bed last night, and the emperor did not send anyone to tell him whether to remember the file. What's more, there is no owner in the Middle Palace now, and I am temporarily taking charge of the harem. After Yang Karen went to bed, he should have come to the palace to follow me. I told you, but she didn't come. I invited her to go out to plead guilty. Does the emperor think I did a good job? Lily squinted her eyes and stared at Yang Yuru on the ground, raised the corners of her mouth, and thought in disgust. She wanted to stand farther away from Chu Yunyang, but he reached out and held her firmly in his palm. After a while, beads of sweat broke out from where they held hands. Guo Beihi's hand was soft and delicate, but Chu Yunyang didn't know it. The reason for practicing martial arts is to use a pen, which makes Lily feel very uncomfortable with the thin calluses and stickiness. There's no need to keep records, my beloved concubine did a great job. Chu Yunyang looked at her half-smiling look and nodded. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked, even Yang Yuru, who fell on the ground. They all stayed for a while. What man would like such a mean behavior when a domineering imperial concubine punishes a talented person who has just been favored in public? Lily spoke frankly, and Chu Yunyang seemed to think it was natural. Everyone who originally thought that the imperial concubine had fallen out of favor felt chills in their hearts when they heard this conversation, and a few who were still a little gloating quickly lowered their heads. Not daring to have the idea of fighting Lily again, so she felt chilled and said hurriedly. Your Majesty, Yang Karen is the emperor's man after all, how could he? Sister, concubine is pregnant. It's better to mind your own business. Otherwise, if something happens to your body, how will I explain it to the emperor? Why don't I send Fu Fangfu Lu to wait on you until you give birth? Your Majesty, what do you think? Lily sneered, seeing that Su had a big belly and still pretended to be a good person, and repeatedly opposed her, so she deliberately spoke to scare her. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan ERWR. Chapter 375. Lily wanted to put people in her palace in front of Chu Yunyang. Recalling Guo Beihi's vicious methods in the past, Sushi's heart went cold. Before Chu Yunyang agreed, she subconsciously held her belly and said coldly. Thank you for your concern, sister, but the palace already has enough manpower. How dare you use my sister's people? That's true, Lily nodded. These words made Sushi dizzy with anger. She bit her lip and stared at Lily, speechless. The wind blowing in the willow is something I am used to using. I just said it casually. Even if my sister wants it, I am reluctant to part with it. After Lily said this, she looked at Suesi's complexion, which looked green and white, and deliberately concealed it. She smiled and said, could it be that my sister, concubine, really took the joke I just made seriously? There are some people that I am willing to reward. That is her blessing. My sister is now pregnant with the emperor's heir. Could it be that this is the case? Are you not blessed enough? You, Lily's words made Sue's chest hurt in anger, and she clenched her teeth tightly. She was speechless for a moment, as if she had been punched in the face. She was very angry, but she did not refute or reply. When did Mr. Guo become so arrogant and domineering? Although she had been willful and flamboyant in the past, at least she was still a little wary of the emperor. Could it be because of Chu Yunyang's love for her that he pampered her to such an extent that he didn't know what the heaven and earth were? The weather is hot and the irritation is strong. It is better for my sister to calm down. It is good for the fetus in her belly. Later, I ask someone to stew birds' nests and snow pears and send them to my sister's palace to dispel the irritation. After saying this, Lily sneered. He glanced at Su, who gritted his teeth and stared at her with red eyes. He stretched out his hand to brush his hair and said, "I'm tired after being out for such a long time. Your Majesty, why don't you spend more time with your sisters here? I'll take my leave now." Chu Yunyang pulled her and didn't let go. Instead, he put his arms around her, hugged her waist and said, "I haven't walked around in the imperial garden for a long time. Please accompany me for a walk, you concubines, please enjoy yourself." Lily struggled a few times in frustration, but failed to get away. Chu Yunyang dragged her away and carried her away. Yang Yuru, who was sitting on the ground, shivered and then managed to get up from the ground. She had just been beaten. The hand Lily stepped on was shaking. She was almost numb to the point of not being able to feel the pain. The back of her hand was completely blue and black. There were footprints that moved a little and it was blue with pain. She had no intention of competing with anyone for favor, but the imperial concubine Guo was really too bullying. If the only consequence of not fighting for favor is to be stepped on the ground, Yang Yuru swore in her heart that one day she would have everyone crawl under her feet. Not knowing that she had stimulated Yang Yuru again, Lily was half carried by Chu Yunyang and walked for a while. Finally, he stopped and stepped on the ground with his feet. Lily was relieved and frowned. The emperor has no official business to deal with today. Did your beloved concubine taste bad? Chu Yunyang reached out and lifted the pendant on her head. There was no emotion or anger on Toshiro's face. He was wearing a sky blue dragon robe embroidered with clouds and sun today. He looked majestic, but Lily was indescribably disgusted. She just felt that the waist and hands that he had just touched were all covered with goosebumps. She resisted the urge to reach out and pat her arm, and the corners of her mouth twitched twice. "Your Majesty is joking." When Chu Yunyang heard this, it was as if he heard a huge joke, and he couldn't help but open his mouth and laugh, ha ha. In this harem, if Guo Bei said that she was the second best in eating sour food, no one would dare to call her the first. She wanted to recruit people from the palace and exclude those who were dissident. She had no idea how much blood of the palace concubines was on her hands. Sometimes, even if Chu Yunyang casually glances at any palace maid, she will either sell the person out of the palace, or send her to some shady place to die. Chu Yunyang has only 2 daughters under his knees for several years since he ascended the throne. The descendants are more or less related to Guo Bei. The reason why Guo Bei had a bad reputation in the palace and Su was so strict with her was not only because of the discord between the 2 concubines De and Gui, but also because Su was afraid that Guo Bei would set her up to have a miscarriage. Such a ruthless woman actually said that she didn't like others. If others heard it, they might not believe it, but Chu Yunyang believed it at this moment. He pulled Lily back to the palace. He had blessed Yang Yuru last night, but he didn't keep any records, so even if Yang Yuru was lucky enough to get pregnant, she wouldn't be able to give birth. At this moment, Lily was being pulled away by him. He winked at Fu Feng and deliberately asked her to deliver a bowl of bazai soup to Yang Yuru in front of Chu Yunyang. Then he returned to the palace and was carried into the palace by Chu Yunyang, who couldn't wait. Chu Yunyang left just before dinner. As soon as he left, the palace servants tidied up Guo Bei's body. Only then did Bei return to her body and asked lazily, "What happened last night, is it clear?" "Back to your majesty, according to a message sent by people from Shenlong Palace, Yang Karen broke into the Tai Chi Palace where the emperor was last night, covered her face and danced a song in front of the emperor, and then led the emperor to chase her. After a long time, he seduced the emperor into favoring her. When Fu Feng said this, he had a look of disdain on his face. Just breaking into the Tai Chi Palace without permission is enough to get her to death. The empress is now in charge of the harem, why not?" After Fu Feng finished speaking, he made a gesture of giving medicine, and whispered, "When the queen entered the palace, the lady gave her a secret medicine last time, saying it would seal her throat when she saw blood. When Lily heard this medicine, she became a little angry. Guo Bei in the plot also had the miraculous medicine, which was given to her by Guo Bei's mother, Mrs. Guo. It was said that it was prepared by a certain doctor and was extremely poisonous. When she was preparing to poison Yang Yuru to death, unexpectedly, the pill was taken out and stuffed into Yang Yuru's mouth. In the end, because the pill was too big, it failed to poison her but almost choked her to death. In the end, Yang Yuru had a chance to breathe until Chu Yunyang arrived in time. Not to mention spitting out the poison, but it was because she had such a crime that she could not deny, and was deprived of the title of noble concubine by Chu Yunyang, and the Guo family was uprooted as a result. Thinking of the pill, Lily twitched the corner of her mouth and waved her hand. "Let's not mention the medicine for now. I have my own sense of discretion. Since Yang Karen loves dancing so much, from tomorrow onwards, she will have to dance for a total of 3 hours a day in my Zikan Palace. No matter whether there is wind or rain." Lily looked at the face in the polished mirror, and a smile slowly appeared in her eyes. "In addition, I will find some low-grade white fungus soup for concubine to send." Fu Feng followed the order and left. Half an hour later, when Su saw a bowl of white fungus soup brought by someone from the imperial concubine's palace, she was so angry that she was trembling with anger. After leaving, Mrs. Su couldn't help but smashed the bowl of food to the ground with hatred. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't sleep well all night. Early the next morning, when everyone came to pay their respects, Yang Yuru suffered a loss yesterday and was among the crowd today. Her skin was red and swollen from the sun yesterday. Even if she applied balm after returning, she could still see it now. The marks on her skin had disappeared after the inflammation. The skin was not as supple and tender as before, and looked a bit haggard. She lowered her head to hide the resentment on her face. When Fu Feng asked someone to take her out, she was still a little dissatisfied, until she heard that Fu Feng asked her to dance at Zikan Palace every day. Yang Yuru's expression suddenly changed. "Dancing? I am also the emperor's wife, and I am not from a religious school. How can I dance for the queen?" When the concubines who were about to leave heard this, they couldn't help but feel a sense of schadenfreude. Although I don't know why Lily always stares at Yang Yuru, but seeing one of her competitors being targeted by Lily, it is naturally a good thing to use Lily's hand to eliminate an enemy. Therefore, no one spoke up for Yang Yuru, but everyone they all stopped and stared at Yang Yuru. "Your Majesty wants to watch the dance, is it possible that Yang Karen doesn't want to?" Fu Feng sneered twice. Not only did Guo Bei look domineering, but even the palace servants around her were also arrogant. "This is your Majesty. The honor given to you is not something others can ask for, so Yang Karen still refuses to thank you." Yang Yuru's cheeks twitched with anger, and she pushed Fu Feng bitterly. "You are a little palace servant, what qualifications do you have to teach me a lesson? Dancing is not allowed, and I don't want this to chill Zongliang's heart, right?" Yang Yuru raised her voice and said loudly, "My concubine is also the eldest daughter of Yang Huan, the fourth-rank Minister of Household Affairs. She is not a member of the Jiao Fangxi. She can be humiliated by others. If you are in a good mood and want to watch the dance, please find someone else." Lily was sitting in the palace without looking back. When she heard Yang Yuru's shouting outside, the smile at the corner of her mouth quickly cooled down. She threw the teacup in her hand heavily on the table, stood up suddenly, and took care of it. He straightened his collar and walked towards the door. Yang Yuru was staring at her with a look of death. Lily narrowed her eyes. Yang Karen, believe it or not, if you make any louder noise, I will be hanged your tongue. She looked at Yang Yuru with a smile, and her tone was soft now, as if she was saying that the weather is sunny today, but her eyes flashed coldly, and everyone could see that she was not joking, but that it was very possible, and everyone had their backs. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. Although Guo Beihe used to be ruthless in the past, most of her dirty tricks were hidden from the light and she didn't dare to tell people in person. She didn't expect that in front of such a group of concubines in public. She even said she wanted to pry Yang Yuru's tongue. Although everyone was very unhappy with Yang Yuru, they still felt a bit of sympathy for her at this time. Is it possible that there is no royal law in this harem? Yang Yuru turned pale with fright. Although she tried to keep calm and refused to admit defeat, her voice involuntarily became softer. Her legs trembled slightly and she swallowed her saliva. My concubine is the daughter of an official, is not. I'm kidding you, do you take it seriously? Lily interrupted her impatiently, frowned and sneered, the legitimate daughter of an official family. What Yang Huan taught you was to go to the Tai Chi palace at night and behave like a fox in front of the emperor. Are you showing off and not following the rules? If you break into the palace gate without permission, I will give you the death penalty. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 376. Yang Yuru didn't expect Lily to bring up what happened the night before. Her eyes suddenly widened, and she bit her lip with a look of guilt on her face. Why, Yang Karen is so good at dancing, and I can't stand the fun of it. If Yang Karen doesn't want to dance, and you broke into the Tai Chi palace secretly the night before, I will have your knees cut out and kill you. The legs were cut off and sent back to the Yang family, so that Yang Huan could teach her a well-behaved daughter. Suddenly, needles could be heard in the venue. A group of concubines did not expect that Yang Yuru was so courageous and dared to break into Tai Chi Hall at night. They felt both hatred and jealousy in their hearts. Some of them wanted to imitate her method, but when they heard what happened to Lily when they were about to cut off the person's legs, they each felt a dull pain in their legs and feet. They temporarily stopped the few thoughts in their hearts and did not dare to speak out. It's just a trivial matter, why is sister so stubborn? Su, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke softly, stroking her belly. She came to Zikan Palace today without saying a word, but now for the sake of in order to exonerate Yang Yuru, everyone's attention was drawn to her as soon as she opened her mouth. This harem is still the emperor's harem, not just my sister's harem. How to punish Yang Karen still needs to be decided by the emperor. Although my sister is the first of the 4 concubines and temporarily takes the position of queen, there is no queen in the palace after all. How to do it still needs to be decided by the emperor. I'm afraid my sister's move is not quite appropriate. Presumptuous, MRSU always loved to use words to silence Beihe Guo. At this moment, Beihe frowned and glanced at MRSU. Thanks to the emperor's attention, I have entrusted the affairs of the harem to my hands. Everyone is convinced. Lily opened her eyes and told lies. Everyone pursed their lips tightly and dared not speak in anger. Yang Yuru couldn't help but hum from her nostrils. She glanced at MRSU gratefully, and then said coldly, I don't know whether you sisters are convinced by the imperial concubine or not, but I am not convinced. Although it is wrong for a concubine to break into the Tai Chi palace without permission, the law is nothing more than that. Favor, the imperial concubine is also a daughter educated by the Duke of Genkuo, yet she always talks about cutting off a person's legs. The tutor of the Duke of Guo is also really. Palm-mouth Lily didn't wait for Yang Yuru to finish. Someone immediately arrested her. In the plot, Yang Yuru was born with a tricky mouth that was not inferior to Sue's, and she was full of benevolent and righteous principles. At first, she felt that it was indeed reasonable, but after careful consideration, she felt ridiculous. It is a capital crime to break into Tai Chi Palace privately. I am in charge of the affairs of the harem under the orders of the emperor. Even if I beat you to death, I can also punish Yang Huan for the crime of being lax with his goddaughter. Reason with me here. I am here. That makes sense. Lily watched Yang Yuru being picked up, and this time she was not as relaxed as when she was in the imperial garden. Instead, a eunuch went into the palace and brought out an iron plate. The iron plate looked thin, but if he slapped it on his face, it wouldn't scratch his face, but the pain went deep into his bones. Yang Yuru was covered in cold sweat after being hit twice. Her mouth was stuffed with a handkerchief and only her nostrils were left to breathe. Her originally beautiful face was now bright red and not bruised, but her expression was a little distorted. Lily didn't seem to notice. Seeing Yang Yuru's expression, she smiled and said, "Recently, I have been asked by the Queen Mother in my dreams at night, saying that a volume of the Nanhua Sutra is missing. If Concubine has nothing to do these days, it would be a good thing for her to copy the book and burn it to the Queen Mother. By the way, it can also accumulate blessings for the child in your belly." When Sushi heard this, she was trembling all over, but Lily ignored her at all. It wasn't until she saw that Yang Yuru's whole body was shaking like chaff, that she felt that the lesson was almost done, so she waved her hand to make people stop. "Today I just want to teach Yang Karen a lesson to let you know the difference between superiority and inferiority. I will give you 10 days to recover from your injuries. After you recover, you will come to my Zikan Palace to dance for 4 hours every day. Your intrusion into the Tai Chi Palace, I will not pursue any further investigation." After saying this, Lily stroked her exquisitely combed hair and waved her hand casually. "Let's go." A group of palace concubines exited Zikan Palace tremblingly. Everyone felt a layer of cold sweat break out on their backs. They all said that Guo Beihe was already domineering in the past, but now it seems that they know what it means to be truly arrogant. She beat Yang Karen in public. It was obviously related to the fact that Yang Karen intercepted her sleeping with her that night. Although Yang Karen used various means to sleep with her, he was beaten to the point of being almost disfigured in the end. The injury would not heal in 10 days and a half. It is impossible to see the emperor while he is fresh. After the injury is healed, the harem will always be short of beauties. How can the emperor still care about her? Moreover, Yang Yuru has to go to Lily Palace to dance every day in the future. Although it has been said since ancient times that accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger, at least the companion still has some future. As long as he pleases the emperor, he will not worry about being rich, but accompanying the emperor in Guo there is only misfortune around the imperial concubine, but not any blessing. Maybe her life will be taken. When everyone walked out of Zikan Palace with scared looks on their faces, although they were very afraid and hated Lily in their hearts, no one dared to think about going against Lily again. That night, when Lily took off her bead ring and prepared to bathe and change clothes, she heard a nanny reply, "Madam, the one on the west side is said to have been frightened today and had fetal gas. The doctor has just informed her that she is pregnant. Now someone has informed the emperor, please see." "What are you looking at? Is there anything good to see? It's not that the belly can't be saved. What's more, if it can't be kept, what does it have to do with me? It's a waste. It's just a fright that it moved the fetus. How do you want to give birth to an heir?" Lily snorted coldly. She made a sound, and her tone and behavior were something that Guo Beihe could do in the past. The grandma nodded, and Beihe took a shower and changed clothes directly, and let the palace servants wring her long hair for her, then went to bed and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up early the next morning, I heard that Sushishin had started to have labor pains before the hour. Before Lily had changed her clothes, Someone came in a panic and knelt down. "Your Majesty, come back to your Majesty, the child in Concubine's belly can't be saved. If you can't save it, you can't save it." "What's all the fuss about?" Lily snorted coldly. Fu Feng was combing her hair, but Leng Hui was frightened. His hands shook and he pulled Lily's hair, making her face turn pale with fright. He suddenly fell to his knees and glared at the palace attendant who came in to report the news. He couldn't help but bravely said, "I don't have that kind of luck in the first place. It's the right thing to do if I can't keep it." Lily rubbed her sore head and signaled Fu Feng to continue combing her hair while listening to the eunuch's reply. It turns out that Su's situation was very urgent last night, but the Zikan palace was locked and Lily was sleeping deeply again. "We only got the news this morning. Last night, Suze not only summoned the medical girl, but also Wenpo. She was already weak, so it was very difficult to conceive this child, and there were signs of miscarriage several times. Lily gave her Chi Shao yesterday, and Su couldn't bear it when she returned home. She had an attack in the middle of the night, and the pain was unbearable until the beginning of the morning. She had just given birth to a male fetus. She just cried twice and then died." At this moment, the whole palace was shocked. Su had been pregnant for nearly 7 months, and people said that she would live and die, but she didn't expect her fate to be bad. Even if she didn't use some cunning trick to deal with her, the child who shouldn't belong to her would still not be born. "Is the emperor gone?" Lily let the palace servants clean her face and makeup, and stood up and spread her arms to let the 4 palace maids dress her. Chu Yuniang should not have gone to court at this time. If he heard Su's little, I am afraid that she will rush there after the early morning court. Lily cannot miss such a big show. Naturally, she must rush to the immortality palace of the Su family before Chu Yuniang leaves the early morning court. "I heard the news. Concubine's bleeding continued after her miscarriage. When I came to report, I heard that the bleeding hasn't stopped yet." The little eunuch knelt on the ground and moved a few steps, whispering the news. "Come on," Lily pursed her lips and said softly, "Reward." She stood up and walked out. A group of people held up the hem of her skirt and hurriedly followed her out. When Lily came to the Changsheng palace where concubine Su was, consort Su's wailing had gradually become quieter, almost too weak to be heard. Concubine Xian and others people who had heard the news a long time ago were already waiting in the palace. When they saw Lily approaching, a group of women hurriedly got down and said, "May the imperial concubine be safe and sound. I and my sister, concubine, are like sisters. Now that the emperor has not come here, I will take the decision regarding the matter of the palace of eternal life." Lily suddenly opened her mouth, and everyone was startled. They secretly thought that Su's life might be in danger. In the palace, Sushi, who was moaning slightly at first, seemed to have gone crazy when she heard this, and screamed miserably, "No need for your fake kindness. Fu Feng, I sent someone to get my token and send someone from Imperial Hospital. The life of concubine Bayat is very important, so there can't be any delay." Lily ignored Su's shouting. As soon as she said this, everyone looked at each other. In the harem, whether it was a headache, a fever, or a life-threatening matter, they always went to the medical woman instead of the imperial doctor. After all, there were differences between men and women. Except for one Chu Yuniang who could come and go freely, even the royal family members did not dare to move around. Naturally, it was impossible for the imperial doctor to enter the harem on weekdays. Although Lily said that she would bear the responsibility, everyone still there is some hesitation. After hearing the words, Fu Feng ran away. The Su family in the palace screamed even more fiercely. After about half a quarter of an hour, 2 imperial doctors carrying medicine boxes ran into the palace in a cold sweat. The older one was a little younger, and he seemed to be an apprentice of the imperial doctor. The concubines should have avoided it, but they didn't want to miss such a good show, so they all sat there with their sleeves in hand and their faces covered, without moving. "Move! Concubine is in critical condition today. The imperial physician will only go in for treatment. If anything happens, I will take full responsibility for it. Lily patted her chest and promised. Due to her past power, the imperial physician naturally did not dare to disobey. She wiped her cold sweat and said, ignoring Sue's refusal. In the inner hall, they each carried the medicine boxes and went in. When Chu Yuniang came out of the morning court and heard about Sue's emergency situation, he happened to catch up with two imperial doctors coming out of the inner hall after giving injections. Kneel down in front of Lily and say, I have lived up to your majesty's trust, and imperial concubine's hemorrhage has stopped. Chu Yuniang heard these words when he entered the palace, and his face turned blue. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan Erwr. Chapter 377. The eunuchs didn't have time to sing "The Emperor has arrived," so they all knelt down when they saw Chu Yuniang's expression. The imperial doctor also trembled all over. A group of palace concubines wanted to watch the show, but were a little scared, so they also knelt down on the ground. Only Lily stood up, twisted her waist and walked towards Chu Yuniang, who bowed and said softly, Your Majesty, Sister de Concubine is in critical condition. She is the Emperor's confidant. Gu Water, how can I make the Emperor suffer the loss of losing his lovely sister de Concubine after losing the prince? Therefore, I specially asked God for help. How dare you pull back Concubine from the hands of King Yama? Is the Emperor very happy? Lily raised her eyes, with a smile as bright as a flower, but there was a bit of sarcasm at the corner of her mouth, and her heart was pounding. I'm very happy. Chu Yuniang's smile also deepened, and the words seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. He heard that the flesh and blood in Sue's belly was dead, and Sue's life was saved. Looking at the two imperial doctors kneeling on the ground, he narrowed his eyes and snorted, Get out. At this moment, the Emperor's heart may not be very happy. Even if he rescued the beloved concubine, after all, there are differences between men and women. Concubine was touched and looked at when the two imperial doctors gave her acupuncture, and she felt a little lost after all. Honor, even if the life is saved, there is no guarantee that the Emperor will think of this in the future. A group of palace concubines did not know whether to be grateful for the loss of a powerful enemy or to be afraid of Lily's cruel methods. Just now, everyone was wondering about Yi Bei's daily relationship with the Su family. The two people disliked each other. How could they save their lives for such an enemy? Only when they saw the Emperor did everyone react. The two imperial doctors hurriedly got up and ran away as if they were still in danger. Everyone dispersed like birds and beasts. Lily originally wanted to run away too. But Chu Yuniang smiled ferociously and pulled her wrist hard. Since Concubine's life has been saved, I would like to express my gratitude to my concubine. Finished. Chu Yuniang locked Lily tightly in his arms, letting her struggle but unable to escape, while dragging her out of Su's palace of eternal life. When Chu Yuniang took him all the way back to Zikan Palace, he still had residual anger on his face, and everyone looked livid. Entering the inner hall, Fu Feng and others wanted to follow him, but Chu Yuniang turned around and glared at a group of people. No one dared to enter again. Only Lily was dragged in by Chu Yuniang. Is it possible that the Emperor is unhappy and thinks that I have done something wrong? Lily was not very scared at the moment. She felt that although Chu Yuniang was unhappy, his murderous aura was not strong. What's more, for some reason, the more Chu Yuniang became, Yuniang was so angry that she felt more and more happy. After being dragged into the inner palace by Chu Yuniang, he threw her onto the bed. Lily was just dazed on the bed. Rolled twice. Then he propped himself up and smiled at Chu Yuniang. Well, Guo Bei, you have really done a good job today. The Suk family has been ruined now. Do you want me to remember that she has been touched by others every time I see her, so that I can deliberately neglect her in the future? Chu Yunyang had a scowl on his face just now, but in a moment he seemed to be a different person. He laughed softly, and now the scowl disappeared without a trace. Since I have lost a beauty, sir. If you know a flower that understands the language, your concubine should naturally give me one as a gift. As he said that, he also sat on the bed and reached out to touch Lily's calf. When he saw Lily subconsciously shrinking her legs, his face turned cold, his eyes revealed a ferocious look, and he leaned forward. Most of his body was almost pressed against Lily, and a shadow enveloped Lily tightly. He stretched out his hand to pinch Lily's chin, with a dangerous expression. "Go, Lily, I can play with you, but my dear wife, I have to be careful. To grasp that degree." Just for a moment, a bit of enchantment flashed across his body, and a bit of bloodthirsty smile appeared on his handsome face. He pinched Lily's chin with one hand, and stroked Lily's head with his free hand. He took off the jewelry on her head one by one and threw it to the ground. Seeing that her hair was covered with blue silk and satin, it was spread all over the bed. "I hope I can be more interested, otherwise if I get impatient." He got closer and closer to Lily, until his breath hit Lily's cheek, and the warm breath came to his face with the smell of ambergris. The cold murderous aura seemed to be real, making the hair on Lily's back stand up. Chu Yunyang's eyes were a little red, and his hand moved down Lily's neck, as if he was going to strangle Lily alive in the next moment. He retracted his palms, with a gentle smile on his lips, and his eyes were a little crazy. "I'll bite you to death." After saying this, Lily's pupils shrank involuntarily, and her cheek muscles twitched twice. She could no longer maintain the smile she had just shown on the surface. Her face turned blue from holding back, and her chest had not had fresh air for a long time. It was a little raw and painful, but her limbs were suppressed by Chu Yunyang, unable to struggle at all. The feeling of being on the verge of death was not pleasant. Chu Yunyang grabbed her upper body and left the bed, like a fish out of water. When her eyes were a little bloodshot, Chu Yunyang suddenly stretched out his hand, and Lily fell heavily back on the bed. Fresh air rushed into her lungs, and she opened her mouth to breathe. The next moment, Chu Yunyang pinched her neck again. "Living." After repeating this for several times, Lily's tears and nose started to flow, and Chu Yunyang laughed softly, like a child who was tired of playing with a toy. "Is it fun?" he asked gently, picked up Lily and held her in his arms, patting her back gently. The crazy expression just now seemed to have been seen somewhere before. Lily's heart was chilling, but a weak smile appeared on her face. Breathing heavily, even though her eyes were filled with tears at this moment, her eyes were full of tears. She was already a little congested, but she still chuckled. "It's fun." As soon as he said these words, the smile on Chu Yunyang's face suddenly disappeared, like the gloom before a storm. He stared at Lily with a somewhat forlorn expression. After a long while, he suddenly raised his head and burst out laughing. As if he had confirmed something, he pushed Lily onto the bed. When Lily's soul floated up, she saw Chu Yunyang kissing Guo Lily's lips heavily, with a fierce expression. Chu Yunyang was like a madman. He didn't know if it was because Su lost the fetus and was set up by Beihe, which made him furious. He tortured Guo Beihe's body severely and didn't leave until the afternoon. Lily returned to this body after Guo Lily was washed and given medicine. Everywhere in her body hurt. Chu Yunyang bit this body in many places, and his actions were so rough that he seemed to have seen such things before. Scene. Lily didn't show any distress, but Fu Feng and others cried in pain for a long time. Chu Yunyang didn't come to Zikan Palace for several days. The Suk family's people were saved, but they lost a lot of blood. Not only was her body weak, she was so angry that day when Lily stimulated her that she fainted and passed out. It took her a few days to wake up, but her life was saved, but she was probably not grateful to Lily in her heart, because according to Sunil in the palace replied, she cursed Lily every day. But the more she cursed, the happier Lily felt. 10 days later, when Yang Yuru recovered from the wounds on her face and came to dance in Lily Palace, the wounds on Lily's neck and body caused by Chu Yunyang were almost healed. Chu Yunyang tortured her, and she thought about Fang Er's plan to torture Chu Yunyang's women back. Although the swelling on Yang Yuru's face had subsided, there were still some bruises on her face. Even after using a thick layer of ointment, it still remained. It was still difficult to conceal the traces on her face. She didn't want to come over originally, but the situation was stronger than the others. Her character of unwillingness to admit defeat and unwilling to give in easily and the reality of the situation forced her to come. She was alone in the purple. In the palace, Chen was dancing like crazy. When she got tired and wanted to stop, a nun would always whip her with a thin whip, which made her so painful that she didn't dare to stop. But no one in Zikin Palace watched her dance at all. Yang Yuru felt like a clown. Even though dancing was actually her hobby and best thing since she was a child, it brought her shame now. She swore in her heart that one day she would torture Lily back like this. With this belief, Yang Yuru only lasted for more than a month, and Consort Su finally completed her confinement. The emperor did not call Lily to sleep with him for 2 months, nor did he come to Zikin Palace. Everyone in the palace was rumoring whether Lily had fallen out of favor again. While everyone was happily announcing the news, Lily was not panicked about it. That one will become restless once she is 2 months old. In my opinion, the Empress was too kind at the beginning and should not have saved her and left such a scourge. The recent Zikin Palace seemed to be deserted again. Coming down, the person who came to please Lily a few days ago disappeared without a trace. Fuyu combed Lily's long, dark hair that had just been washed, and while massaging her head, she asked about today's questions. The news that arrived was told to Lily. During dinner, I heard that the man personally stewed ginseng chicken soup in the small kitchen and took it to the Tai Chi hall to ask for an audience with the emperor. Lily sneered and pretended not to have heard the news. Whether Chu Yunyang came or not had nothing to do with her. What she wanted to do on this mission was to torture Yang Yuru and make her fall out of favor. Now that half of the mission was completed, Chu Yunyang it's best not to come, lest the sight of her makes her sick. He hadn't been here for a while. Lily's skin was so clear and dewy, her cheeks were flushed, and her complexion was better than before. She didn't light the sandalwood sent by Chu Yunyang anymore. Anyway, Guo Lily's body was already in ruins. This time Chu Yunyang must have known that she was destined to have no children in her life, so she didn't send any more sandalwood in the past 2 months. She must have known that she would never have another child. Let her do the trouble. I'm tired. I locked the palace door earlier. Lily stretched lazily. Before she could finish her words, the tall figure of Chu Yunyang was reflected in the bronze mirror in front of her. Who came in at some unknown time, was standing not far behind her. His eyes met Lily's in the mirror, and he was looking at her with a smile on his lips. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 378. This fright was no small matter. When Fuyu thought about what she had just said, her face turned pale, her body was shaking like chaff, and she couldn't even say a word to greet the emperor. Look at this potential, get out of here, Lily snorted coldly, stretched out her legs and kicked Fuyu next to her. After receiving this kick, Fuyu seemed to have come to her senses, and several maids hurriedly knelt down. On the ground, they greeted Chu Yunyang and then filed out. Lily was sitting on her knees in front of the bronze mirror table. Just as she was about to stand up, Chu Yunyang walked up to her like a ghost, stretched out his hands and put them on Lily's shoulders, and pushed her back onto the couch again. Smoothing her long, smooth, satin-like hair, "My beloved, you don't have to be polite. My concubine's feet are sore." Chu Yunyang seemed to have forgotten that he had gone crazy last time. He showed a gentle and elegant expression, smiled, lowered his head and kissed Lily gently on the forehead. Lily felt as if she had been touched by a poisonous snake. The hairs all over her body stood up. She murmured something, wishing she could kick Chu Yunyang as if she had just kicked Fuyu. There was a smile on her face, and both of them seemed to be forgot what happened before. Chu Yunyang did not bring anyone else with him this time. He was not annoyed when he heard Lily's words. Instead, he smiled and hugged Lily horizontally. When he walked toward the inner hall by a familiar road, Lily pretended to hug his neck. She grabbed him with her very delicate nails. When she saw that Chu Yunyang's breath was calm and he seemed to feel no pain at all, he rubbed it pretending to be distressed. Didn't Sister Defei invite the Emperor to enjoy chicken soup tonight? It's the hardest to bear the kindness of a beautiful woman. You idiot. Others have given you chicken soup, but you don't know how to be courteous. Chu Yunyang's voice was resentful, but when he heard Sue's, his expression faded. His eyes were a little sinister. Sue's body has been seen by 2 men. Although this move was to save her life, for Chu Yunyang, it was like a waste of time. In addition, Sue's failure to give birth to her son made her too young. Now that she is young, how can the Emperor still like her after he has a new goal? From now on, he will feel disgusted when he thinks of her. It is inevitable that Sue will fall out of favor. There is no bloodshed in killing people in the harem. Guo Bei used to look fierce, but she actually didn't cause much harm to people. At least in the plot, she was easily defeated by Yang Yuru and Sushi, and she didn't even cause any damage to those 2 people. She became the ultimate loser. Now that Lily has just changed her approach, Su has naturally fallen out of favor, and there will be no chance of her regaining favor in the future. A simple action will cost her life. But it was enough to drive her into the abyss. Lily, give birth to a son for me. Chu Yunyang restrained Lily under his body. He leaned over and pressed forward. There was something strange in his eyes. He reached out and touched Lily's cheek. His eyes were half closed, and there were a few emotions flashing through them that were hard to see and catch. As soon as he said these words, as soon as she left her mouth, a sense of sadness surged up in Lily's heart. Without thinking, she used all her strength to kick Chu Yunyang, who was leaning on her. Roll. I don't know whether Chu Yunyang was not prepared for her to stretch her legs to kick him, or because she was so angry that she used more strength than usual. Chu Yunyang was accidentally kicked out of the bed by her and fell to the bed. After that, Bien sat up with a complicated look on his face. First his eyes were fierce, and then there was a strange look in his eyes. Not only was he not angry, but he looked at Lily and suddenly opened his mouth and laughed, ha ha ha, sure enough. At this moment, Lily resisted the urge to stab this lunatic to death with a knife. She smiled and stretched out her hand to Chu Yunyang. What happened to the Emperor just now? I actually feel that the Emperor has changed. I'm so scared I've lost some of my manners. Want her to have a son? It was very refreshing when she was given the medicine, but now she said such words to stimulate Guo Bei even though she knew her body couldn't give birth. Fortunately, the original owner was gone, otherwise I don't know what it would be like to hear this. Chu Yunyang stretched out his hand, and when Lily was about to retract her hand, he moved as fast as lightning, grabbed Lily and dragged her off the bed. When he saw her startled, unable to help but laugh again, he turned over and pinned her down. Floating in the air, Bei did not look at the scene in Zikan Palace. It was not until the sky was dim that someone waited on Chu Yunyang and stood up to leave. After Guo Bei's body was cleaned, she returned to her own body. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Over the course of one night, those who had been eager to leave Zikan Palace rushed back again, with fawning looks on their faces. Lily ignored this group of scheming villains. A group of palace concubines outside were already waiting to greet her. The concubine Su, who couldn't win over the Emperor's heart with a pot of chicken soup stewed by her own hands yesterday, was also among them. When Lily came out and saw her, she almost failed to connect this now dark and thin woman with the cold and delicate beauty back then. After losing a child, the Su family lost a lot of weight. There were a few new faces among the group of women. Chu Yuniang was blessed with a new group of beauties recently and selected a few more outstanding ones. In addition, there is another biggest change, that is, the original Yang Yu was like Yang Cai. She was the first to sleep with the new palace servants, but now she still bears the title of Cai Ren. In just 2 months, she has changed a lot. She's getting stronger. Compared to concubine's thinness, Yang Karen was much stronger than before. Her originally plump but fleshless figure now looked much bullier. There were faint traces of strength on her arms and thighs, and her small waist was visible. She has grown powerfully, and her waist, which originally looked slender with a belt on it, no longer looks noble even if it is wrapped with a gold belt, but rather has a martial aura. When Lily saw her, she could barely hold back her laughter. In the past 2 months, Yang Yuru has been detained by her to dance in the Zikan Palace. She dances for 4 hours every day. This is a powerful exercise. In addition, Lily has greeted the imperial dining room and provided Yang Yuru with all the meals. How can she gain weight quickly and get stronger by eating a diet based on whole grains? Even if she has a good appetite after exercising a lot every day, it will be difficult for her not to gain weight for a period of time. You must know that fat is not bad. Although a beautiful woman has a little meat, she will look bloated, but most men don't like women who are as thin as ribs. Yang Yuru used to be just like that, with meat on her body but not too fat. In addition, she has practiced dancing all year round, and her graceful figure is quite attractive. But now she has gained muscles and her body looks much stronger, but at the same time she has lost some of her feminine delicacy. If this continues, within 3 months, she will be. Lily was confident that no matter how clever she was, it would be difficult for her to fall back in love with her in the future. After all, no man liked to hold in his arms a delicate and tender person who was full of muscles and had no trace of a woman, especially Chu. Yuniang was raised like this, an emperor with a harem of 3,000 beauties. Yang Yu was not aware of the changes in her body at this time, but she had suffered a lot recently, so when Lily came out, she subconsciously showed a look of resentment in her eyes, but after all, she had been dealt with a lot, and she also knowing how to restrain himself, he hurriedly lowered his head again, but the resentful eyes just now still fell into Lily's eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up in contempt. May the queen be blessed with good fortune and good fortune. Everyone stood up and bowed, but Mrs. Su sat still and said, seeing that the imperial concubine has not come out for a long time, I thought that the imperial concubine was unwell. Her tone was a little gloomy, and the smile on her face was a little weird. Everyone knew that she was yesterday. I boiled chicken soup and sent it to the Tai Chi Palace. Others had already delivered the chicken soup. Almost every day, the soup Chu Yuniang received contained more than 10 poisons. This was because many concubines were not qualified to deliver soup to the Tai Chi Palace. Reason, logically speaking, this thing is not unusual. When everyone gave it away, Su's status was just a little higher. But what hit her the most was that Su was harmed by Lily to the point where she is now. But this morning the emperor left from Zikan Palace during his morning court session. There were spies in every palace, and no news could be kept secret in the palace. It was as if Su had been slapped in the face by an invisible slap, and her face was completely lost from the inside out. Now she was going to attack, but everyone was too wise to speak out. When gods fight, mortals suffer. Many people lowered their heads in unison, pretending to be deaf and blind. I have neither had a miscarriage nor lost a child, so why am I feeling unwell? So she was not being kind at this time, but Lily knew where she was most in pain and hit her hard, until she was hit hard. Her expression changed drastically, and she stood up all of a sudden. Her movements were so big that her wide sleeves knocked over the teacup placed on the small table beside her. There was a soft clang sound, and the teacup rolled down and fell to the ground. Even though there was a thick blanket on the ground and the cup was not broken, the tea was spilled all over the floor and the table. Jayu's dress, which was sitting under the Su family, got a little wet and burned her. His face was red, but he didn't dare to shout. Absurd. Lily's face darkened, and she stretched out her hand heavily and slapped it on the table. Concubine, please pay attention to your manners. I wish you lost your fetus and are insane, so you will be exempted from heavy punishments and only minor punishments will be given. Copy 210 volumes of the Nam Hua Sutra will be handed over to me in half a month. Shut up, I lost my son because of your treacherous concubine, Su suddenly shouted loudly, pointed at Lily and said, that day, someone made some white fungus soup for me to drink. I had constant abdominal pain at night, and I miscarried, all because of you. Concubine seemed to be going crazy at this moment. In the past, even if she didn't like Lily, she had never been so angry like this. But now she seemed to have no scruples and screamed bitterly, it's you, a poisonous woman, who has such a cruel heart. Damn, give my son his life back. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 379. A group of concubines who had not yet stood up were startled, and all of them moved aside. When there was some panic in the crowd, Lily sat down again with a smile, holding up her orchids and fingering her clothes, without any sign of panic. Concubine went crazy. She covered her mouth and dragged her down to find out which gossiping palace maid was the instigator. I am only worried about the emperor's heir. How could I harm the emperor's heir? I'm not crazy. You all saw what happened that day. What are you waiting for? The demon concubine caused trouble in the harem. Don't you want to bring order to the harem? So she seemed to be determined to pull Lily down this time. Lily she was seriously hurt. Although she had not drunk the white fungus soup that Lily gave her that day, her miscarriage was definitely related to Lily. If Lily hadn't humiliated her that day and asked her to copy the Nanhua Sutra in front of everyone. After she returns, she won't have constant abdominal pain due to excessive mental fluctuations. She will no longer have a son, and later it will even ruin her reputation. If Su died in her most beautiful years and at this time, she would naturally be a cinnabar mole in the emperor's heart. Chu Yuniang would never forget her and would be deeply impressed by her. But because Lily framed him so ruthlessly, now that her reputation was ruined, she even let the imperial doctor touch her body, and made Chu Yuniang feel alienated from her. Instead of pitying her, he thought she had lost her virginity. Now the emperor has neglected her and has been confinement for 2 days. In the middle of the month, she didn't come to her palace of eternal life even once. Even if she sent chicken soup yesterday, the emperor didn't summon her at all. Su was already old and felt that there was no hope, so she simply thought about revenge and pulled Lily off the horse, and then promoted Yang Yuru to the throne. She can't survive. But Yang Yuru's father is her father's subordinate. From now on, even the top 2 people belong to the same faction. At least the wealth didn't go to outsiders. Yang Yuru had hated Lily for a long time, so naturally she hit it off with Su. That day, Lily had someone pull Yang Yuru to kneel outside the pavilion and almost quarreled with Su. He did say that he would make white fungus soup to calm her down. Later, he sent someone to deliver the white fungus soup to the Changsheng Palace. Everyone also heard about it, but Su didn't. If you are not a fool, how could you really drink what Lily sent? Everyone knew where Su had been hit, and they just bit Lily and wouldn't let go. But this matter is beneficial to everyone, so no one speaks out and is the one who speaks out. They all stand aside and watch the fight between the tigers and the tigers. My concubine happened to be in Concubine's palace that day, and saw with her own eyes that the nun next to Concubine was bringing white fungus soup. After Concubine was finished drinking it, she suffered from abdominal pain. Yang Yuru had a strange expression on the corner of her mouth. Suddenly stood up, pointed at Lily and said, "Even if the imperial concubine is astonishingly powerful, she can't cover the sky with one hand." The claps of Papa Papa rang out before Lily could speak. Chu Yuniang, who had not yet changed into his dragon robe after going to court, strode into the palace, and glanced seductively at the concubines in Zikan Palace with his upturned peach blossom eyes. With a smile on his face, he asked, "What are you concubines talking about? They are talking so lively." "Your Majesty." Concubine Xian stood up and leaned towards Chu Yuniang. "Sister De Fei was joking with Sister Gai Fei just now, saying." As Concubine Xian said, she covered her mouth and smiled, her eyes twitching. A somewhat charming look appeared on her face as she turned around. She stretched out her hand to cling to Chu Yuniang, but like many concubines, she regretted that she didn't expect to meet Chu Yuniang at Lily's place today, otherwise she would be able to dress up a little more gorgeous. Chu Yuniang, who had never refused a beautiful woman's offer in the past, actually stepped aside to avoid her, and instead walked towards Lily. "What was my beloved concubine talking about before?" Concubine Xian froze in place, her face turning green and white. "Please, Your Majesty, make the decision for me. What I hate most at this moment is not Concubine Xian, who was humiliated on the spot, but Concubine Su, who gave me chicken soup yesterday but ended up slapping her in the face. Her yesterday was in vain." After a scheming, Chu Yuniang did not go to her palace of eternal life but went to the Lily Palace where she had harmed him. Su did not dare to hate the emperor and could only vent all her resentment on Lily. "I have been hiding something in my heart for 2 months. I haven't said it out loud for 2 months. The imperial concubine Guo tried to kill the emperor's heir. That day she gave me a bowl of white fungus soup. After drinking it, I felt abdominal pain. That night, the fetus in my belly became the emperor's. The eldest son is gone, Your Majesty." Su wailed, her eyes were misty with tears, and she looked particularly lovable. Lily stood aside with a sneer. When she heard Sushi's accusation, she snorted impatiently. Her arrogant attitude without any repentance made Sushi feel an unknown fire in her heart. She was so angry that her body trembled and her heart became even more angry. He hated Lily so much that he gritted his teeth. "My beloved concubine, is what Concubine De said true?" Chu Yuniang gave Lily a gentle look. Instead of getting angry, he asked with interest, "If it is true, my dear concubine must really recruit her." Mrs. Su breathed a sigh of relief. Although Chu Yuniang's calm attitude was completely different from the situation she had imagined, in which people would arrest Lily immediately after knowing the truth. But at least Chu Yuniang didn't believe it at all. Her own words comforted her to some extent, and she hurriedly pointed to Yang Yuru and said, "In the scene that day, Yang Karen also happened to be in the concubine's palace. If the emperor doesn't believe it, he can ask Yang Karen. If there is only half a lie, and it is certain that there will be a thunder and lightning strike that day, and he will not die easily." When Yang Yuru heard her name, she quickly stepped out from the group of palace concubines and prostrated herself. If she had prostrated herself like this in the past, she would have been extremely charming. After all, she broke into the Tai Chi palace without permission and seduced Chu Yuniang into making a temporary decision. Fortunately, in addition to her graceful dancing, she also has her outstanding appearance. But at this moment, Yang Yuru was strong and strong. When she fell down, the silk skirt perfectly showed the shape of the muscles on her thighs. Chu Yuniang did not like the healthy beauty of this kind of power. He had it from his palace. The beauty could tell that he liked delicate women. When he glanced at Yang Yuru, his brows immediately wrinkled, with a look of disgust on his face. Chu Yuniang simply forgot that he had slept with this woman that day. He pulled Lily and took 2 steps back. "Yang Karen." "Your Majesty," Yang Yuru called softly and coyly. The softer she lowered her voice, the more coquettish her expression became. Chu Yuniang felt that the scene in front of him was becoming more and more eye-catching. Yang Yuru is more than just strong. Moreover, it has become much darker. The skin is not as white and tender as jade before, but is rougher. Chu Yunyang can't believe that he has registered such a woman before. Yang Yuru's existence at this moment belongs to him. Shameful, he subconsciously turned his head away. When he saw Lily beside him, who looked arrogant but still charming, he felt a little more comfortable. What do you think of Concubine's words? He didn't give Yang Yuru a chance to speak. She immediately interrupted Yang Yuru's words. When Lily saw Chu Yunyang's expression, she knew that her purpose of dragging Yang Yuru into the palace to dance every day had finally been achieved. Yang Yu has been dancing every day for 2 months. She is no longer as beautiful as she was when she first entered the palace. Now she looks much older than she actually is. She has lost her appearance, even if she is full of knowledge, even if she is quirky and kind and considerate, even if she embodies all the truth, goodness, and beauty in the world. What kind of appearance can she use to attract the emperor to fall in love with her? I am used to eating big fish and meat. Being used to seeing all kinds of beauties, Chu Yunyang might have a temporary interest in her. But as time goes on, it is absolutely impossible for Yang Yuru to dominate the harem like in the plot. One of Guo Bei's 2 most important goals has been achieved. As long as Yang Yuru is no longer favored, even if he is arrogant in the end and takes her to be buried with him before his death, without her, there will be no rise of the Yang family, even if Guo the family strength has been exhausted, and it is impossible for the Yang family to replace the Guo family. The mission of this trip is finally completed. Without any worries in her heart, Lily no longer had to worry about anything, and she could speak and do things as she pleased. When Chu Yunyang asked her what she thought about causing the abortion of Concubine's belly, Lily said without thinking. Concubine said she had a miscarriage after eating the tremella soup sent by the concubine. If you want to know whether what she said is true or false, according to my opinion, it is better to cut open her abdomen and see if there is tremella soup in the abdomen. Don't you already know? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Sushi was even more shocked and looked back at Lily, forgetting to cry. Chu Yunyang pursed his lips and did not speak. His eyes were filled with light. After a while, he couldn't hold it back and laughed softly. He was restrained at first, but later he laughed out loud. Absurd. Where in the world can you have a cesarean section to test the authenticity? What's more, 2 months have passed, and the imperial concubine is going to kill someone and silence her. Yang Yuru came back to her senses and said subconsciously, is there any king in this world? The law. The imperial concubine herself is setting an example for the 6th palace, but she unexpectedly came up with such a plan to harm people's lives? She is really unworthy of being an imperial concubine. I beg the emperor to arrest Guo and interrogate her to see if she. In my opinion, you are the one who is ridiculous. Lily gently stroked Lu Hai hanging in front of her forehead, smiling with half-squinted eyes. Give her abortion medicine? I am really afraid of wasting the best medicinal materials. They just took some white fungus that had been moldy for several years, mixed it with water, soaked it, and sent it over. If Sister De Fei really wants to drink it, it can be seen that Sister De Fei is born not to eat good food. If she really has a miscarriage because of this, it is also a bad luck for her sister. It's the fate of being childless. What she said made Concubine so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She felt severe pain in her chest. Before Chu Yunyang asked her to sit down, Lily sat back on the chair and lazily leaned her upper body against the chair. Besides, it's up to you. A small talent deserves to be sent to me. It's a pity that you are not the master of the Middle Palace. According to me, your heart is as high as the sky, and your life is as thin as paper. Lily now looks more and more confident. Everyone doesn't know why she dares to be so arrogant in front of Chu Yunyang. However, His Majesty the Emperor, who is always in a gloomy and unpredictable mood, has no intention of stopping her. Instead, he stares at her with interest. So she originally wanted to drag Yang Yuru to talk more, but Chu Yunyang waved his hand without looking back, so she did not protect the fetus well, failed to protect the royal bloodline, stripped off the title of virtuous concubine, and demoted her to Zhao Yi. Move out of the palace of eternal life and move to the palace on the west side to rest and recuperate. You are not allowed to leave the palace without my permission. If Yang Karen and others commit any offenses, they will be punished with 10 boards. It was obviously a matter of great importance to the emperor's heir, but Chu Yunyang actually lifted it up and put it down gently. Lily's arrogant attitude was not punished in the end, but the person who complained was in bad luck. Everyone was a little confused by this result. Your Majesty, my concubine is not convinced. Sister de Fei has lost her prince, so why should she be punished by the emperor? Why is the evil man still sitting on the chair without any retribution? Dad said that princes who break the law are guilty of the same crime as the common people. Is it possible? Is the emperor deliberately favoring the imperial concubine? I don't agree with you, I don't agree with you. 2 strong eunuchs came forward and grabbed Yang Yuru, but she just raised her arms. Then he knocked the 2 sturdy eunuchs to the ground. All of a sudden he rushed towards Chu Yunyang. When she was about to reach out and hug Chu Yunyang's legs, Chu Yunyang suddenly stretched out his foot and kicked her hard in the face. Yang Yuru was stunned for a moment after this kick. Before she could react, she felt a strong wind blowing by. Her body flew up lightly, and she fell backwards. She didn't fly until she was 2 or 3 meters away. He fell heavily to the ground. There was a bang, and all the bones in her body seemed to fall apart. She was so dizzy that before she could turn around, Chu Yunyang had already snorted coldly. Assassin, asked the person behind the scenes. Before Yang Yuru could react, she only heard the word assassin shouted by Chu Yunyang in front of her. She raised her head in confusion and saw Lily leaning crookedly against the spacious imperial concubine. On the chair, one elbow rested on the arm of the chair, and his white wrist supported his chin. The wide-sleeved robe fell to the edge of the chair, revealing the white lotus-like jade arms that were dazzlingly white. The golden armor she was wearing shone with brilliance, making her face look somewhat coquettish. There was a sneer on the corner of Lily's mouth, which seemed to be contempt or ridicule. Yang Yuru came back to her senses and was about to say that she was not an assassin. At that time, a eunuch had already taken a veil and covered her mouth. I don't know what was stained on the handkerchief. She didn't say a word. After struggling for a few times, her eyes slowly dimmed. What remained in her memory the most was that the imperial concubine's beautiful face had a bit of evil aura. Such a face. The noble concubine is a virtuous and virtuous lady. Su is talking nonsense. I will just pretend that what happened today never happened. Chu Yunyang glanced at Su, who was sitting softly on the ground, and spoke slowly. Just now, a person who helped Su's mouth was dragged out as an assassin. Now, how dare everyone say that Chu Yunyang is telling lies? In Zikan Palace, Su couldn't hold it back any longer. She could already predict how miserable her future life would be after she offended Lily today. She felt a sharp pain in her chest. She almost died of hemorrhagic collapse when she lost her child, although the imperial doctor rescued her in the end. But after all, her body was still weak. She was not in good health to begin with. She had never left the medicine bowl since she was a child. Now she was stimulated and thought about the hopelessness of her future life. She suddenly opened her mouth and spurted out a mouthful of blood. Haha, the emperor only cares about protecting the demon concubine, but he doesn't even care about the inheritance of his children. Even if my concubine died in front of the emperor today, I will never humiliate the demon concubine. As soon as she finished speaking, Lily suddenly waved her hand. Wait a minute. Chu Yunyang turned to look at her, reached out and grabbed her stretched out hand in his palm, clasping it tightly with his 10 fingers. So she sneered, and was about to show that she would never accept Lily's persuasion and beg for mercy. but saw that she stretched out her other finger and pointed at the palace door. "If you want to die, please stay far away, so as not to ruin the feng shui of this palace." As soon as she said these words, Sushi almost spat out a mouthful of blood again, and everyone's faces turned a little blue. They didn't expect Lily to be so arrogant. If it were anyone else, she might have tried to persuade Sushi not to die so as not to ruin her reputation. But as if he was afraid that his reputation would not be bad enough, he instead made Su's death farther away. Chu Yuniang couldn't help but want to laugh, but saw Su covering his face and running out quickly as if he was humiliated. She finally returned to the palace and prepared to hang herself from a beam, but she was told by the palace officials that the emperor wanted her to move out of the palace of eternal life. Su's original intention of asking for death was interrupted by the series of events, and when her heart was filled with anger, later, Fu Feng asked Fu Feng to have someone pretend to send the so-called poison pill that Mrs. Guo gave her when she first entered the palace and sent it to Mrs. Su. "Sister De Fei wants to die. I should also have the beauty of an adult. This pill will temporarily give it to her and help her reach the fairyland as soon as possible." At this moment, Chu Yuniang was still in Zikan Palace. He saw her having someone bring out a brocade box, which contained a brown pill about the size of a longan. He also heard her say that it was poison, so he took a sip from the teacup. Chu Yuniang almost spit out the tea as soon as Bei finished speaking, and his face turned mostly dark. "Where did you get this medicine?" Although the concubines in the palace had many tricks behind their backs, Lily was the first one who dared to take out the poison in front of him. Chu Yuniang's face was a little gloomy, but Lily didn't even look at him. "Enter the palace. Brought from time to time. These medicines are not allowed in the palace. Don't you know, my concubine," Chu Yuniang said as he leaned towards Lily again. When he reached out to pick up the brocade box, Lily retracted her hand and turned it over. Rolling his eyes, "Can't I prepare some food for you, my concubine? There are indeed some medicines that cannot be taken freely in the palace for fear of someone trying to kill the emperor, even though the emperor has eunuchs who test the medicines around him. But don't be afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of the eventuality." But when Lily said that the medicine was for herself, Chu Yuniang was choked and speechless. The smile at the corner of his mouth froze a little, and he snorted, snatched the pills and threw them outside the palace door. "Send them to Mrs. Su." When he could get Guo Bei, he didn't feel that there was anything to cherish. After all, women were just playthings to Chu Yuniang. Who he pampered and who was ignored just depended on his mood or whether these pets could please him. But suddenly something happened. One day, when a pet disobeyed and rebelled, showing no fear of anything, not even death, he actually became a little surprised. She was not afraid of the emperor's cruelty. She could enjoy the wealth and splendor but didn't seem to need it. Nothing could win over her heart, so Chu Yuniang naturally had to lower his stature. After educating Lily for a long time on what she shouldn't eat, Chu Yuniang finally decided to keep an eye on her more when seeing how impatient she looked. When Sushi received the pill from Lily, she was so angry that she stepped on the poison on the ground. No matter how much she wanted to die, she could never die at Lily's hands. Let her be satisfied and read the joke. Sushi originally wanted to. The dead heart has gone through the series of twists and turns. Slowly she gave up that idea, and she cherished the thought of living to see what would happen to Lily. It is no longer a matter of life and death as before. It's a pity that Lily didn't turn out as Sue expected in the end. Evil people will be punished. The emperor, who had been slowly neglecting her in the past, somehow suddenly started to favor her again. Even though there were complaints about Guo Bei in the palace and no matter how many people scolded her, her position as a noble concubine had never changed. Even if there were new beauties in the palace later, there would still be a group of beauties who had to kneel at her feet. After 5 years, the Su family was equivalent to being in the cold palace. Not only did she not wait until Lily fell out of favor, but she closed her eyes unwillingly when she could no longer drag it out. At this moment, in Zikan Palace, Chu Yunyang was sitting in Lily's bedroom, reaching out to pinch her waist. Lily was lazily lying on the bed, not wanting to pay attention to him. Chu Yunyang himself couldn't figure out why he didn't want it when he could get it easily. Now that Lily doesn't like him, he feels rare again. The beauties in other palaces were not as diligent in serving the imperial concubine as he was in the Zikan palace. From time to time, he teased Lily and said a few words. After a while, Lily became annoyed with him and couldn't help but sit up. "My concubine congratulates you for having a prince. I will be happy to have a successor to the Qin dynasty in the future. If my beloved concubine is willing to give birth to a prince for me, that would be a real congratulation." Chu Yunyang thought of the incense he gave to Guo Beihe, and now his expression became a little gloomy. Although he has always been willful and secretive, it didn't matter to him that he had no descendants, but now for some reason, he felt regretful. Ever since Lily entered this mission a few years ago, he has had strange dreams one after another, as if he dreamed of another life of a person who looked completely different from himself, where there were tall buildings and cars that could be driven. He occasionally became a man named Muzun's. People sometimes called themselves emperors, but a woman named Lily appeared twice in different lives. He began to feel regretful and began to desperately want a child related to Lily. In the past 2 years, Chu Yunyang has privately asked the imperial doctor to take care of Lily's body. Her health is much better than before, but she seems to be aware of it and has already begun to take the decoction to avoid the child. Chu Yunyang stopped her a few times, and but I go my own way. Now that the situation has turned around, this has to be said to be retribution. The prince theory spoken by the two masters in Zikan Palace spread quickly. While everyone in the harem was in panic, suddenly the concubines who had given birth to princes in the past few years began to feel insecure, especially the emperor. After deliberately revealing his attitude of leaving his mother to keep his son and giving it to a concubine to raise, everyone began to be afraid. Concubine Guo doted on the harem, and Beihe's reputation as a domineering child was further enhanced because of these things. Somewhere in the Yeding Palace, Yang Yu, who had almost assassinated the emperor and was sent here, was almost beaten to death. In the past few years, she unwillingly wanted to regain his favor several times. She tried many times before. She had wanted to stay at the place where Chu Yunyang passed by to create a chance encounter with him. She had wanted to follow the same example as before and sneak into the Tai Chi Palace to dance for the emperor again. She had wanted to find someone to trust, someone with information. She was a concubine, but it was of no use. She was not as young and beautiful as before. She even had injuries on her face when she was tortured. Although she later tried every means to deal with these scars, she was never as beautiful as before. Whenever Yang Yuru thought that Lily was responsible for all this, she couldn't help but curse God for being unfair, but as time went by, she began to feel desperate. When she first entered the palace, she wanted to live an ordinary life, but in fact, everything she did was extraordinary, whether it was a series of subconscious actions in front of the emperor, or several subsequent confrontations with the imperial concubine. What she called living an ordinary life is just her own idea. Because Yang Yuru had a strong and good figure that she had developed by dancing in the Lily Palace, she became the favorite object of many nuns in the Yeding Palace. She was almost always the one who did some of the most tiring, dirty and hard work. And because of her influence, her natal family also began to decline. Because her father raised such a daughter like her, his career naturally stopped here, and no one dared to marry the remaining daughters of the Yang family. Yang Yuru no longer resembled the plot. The reason why he was favored was that the Yang family replaced the Guo family as the prime minister of the court. Naturally, the plot completely changed at this point, and Guo Beihe's wish was fulfilled. To be continued. P.S. 2 updates in 1. 2 updates in 1, a big update of 6,500 words. The reason why I specially remind you is because I'm afraid that the girls will think I haven't updated enough. Thanks to Mars Tong, dear San Heshabai for the reward. Thanks to Chang Soon, dear He Shivi who gave the tip. The reason why there was no update yesterday was because I uploaded the novel in advance and went out for a walk. Now there are two ways to add more time. One is to update it 4 times a day until the Heshabai debt is paid off, and the other is to update it 3 times a day, also until the debt is paid off. I did the math. The third update this month was supposed to be on the 20th, which is not a few days away. If everyone's fan votes support it, plus He Shivi's debt, if there are 3 updates every day, how about this month? Updated 3 times a day. There are 2 methods. Which way do the girls from Rewards and Shivi want to repay their debts? Tell me in the book review section, Anos. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 380. When they returned to the starry sky, Li Yangzi had already appeared in the starry sky. When he saw Lily, he waved to her. Lily was stunned for a moment, then realized and walked towards him. She was embraced by Li Yangzi. After completing the mission, it felt good to be back in the starry sky with someone waiting for her. Lily hesitated for a moment and put her hand on his waist. Li Yangzi quickly put his hand on her back. He pulled away and didn't hold her tightly, which made Lily feel a little relieved. At the same time, she didn't notice that her hand was still held in his palm. Mission accomplished. Although Li Yangzi still looked as cold as before, there was still a bit of freshness in his expression, and Lily's information appeared in the starry sky. Gender, female, variable. Name, Lily. Age, 21. Intelligence, 79, out of 100. Appearance, 83, out of 100. Physical strength, 71, 100 full points. Force, 45, out of 100 points. Spirit, 62, out of 100 points. Reputation, 30, 100 full points. Skills, 9 Yang Manual, 9 Yin Manual, Heaven and Earth Gate Tao Te Ching, Southern Gu Technique, Star Body Training Technique. Specialties, Intermediate Cooking Skills, Advanced Acting Skills, 5 Elements, and Bagua, Slight Dabbling. Charisma, 57, out of 100. Collection, The Love of the Corpse King, The Blessing of the Saint, The Angel's Heart, The Dragon King's Promise, The Charm of the Fox, Mother's Love Like a Mountain, The Uncrowned King, The Way of the Sword, The Warlord's Perseverance, The Monarch's Beloved Concubine. Lily found that in the recent missions, several attribute values had not increased as much as before. This time, many attribute values had not changed at all, except for the increase in appearance, spirit, and charm. In the reputation column, 2 points were deducted. She looked at several new additions to her collection. I couldn't help but ask, why don't my attribute values increase as before? When the attribute value reaches a certain level, if you want to increase it again, the person who asks you to do the task may not be able to pay the price. In the future, your attribute value will only be increased once your tasks have accumulated to a certain level. When Li Yangzi said this, the corner of his mouth was light. He ticked the hook lightly, and then quickly returned to his previous cold demeanor. As for collections, you should understand their benefits. Whose Hame can make the targets of future tasks, especially people of different genders, treat you favorably. With a certain degree of favorability and a mother's love, it will be easier for you to gain more favor from the mission's mother in every mission. As for the uncrowned king, I guess you have already guessed its benefits in the plot this time. This time when she became Guo Beihe, even though Beihe was not named the queen by Chu Yunyang in the end, she was only posthumously named the queen after Guo Beihe's body died. However, when she was alive, she was not a queen but was more powerful than the queen. People. Lily nodded, and then thought that the appearance of the Way of Sword was obtained by her in the world of cultivating immortals. It should mean that if you are lucky enough to enter such a world again in the future, you can still choose sword cultivation. It should be easier than cultivating immortals for the first time. As for the warlord's persistence, Lily didn't dare to think deeply about it. It probably had something to do with Ye Changjin. Do you want to enter the mission again, or take a rest? Li Yangzi did not explain the collection of the monarch's beloved concubine. He just lowered his head and glanced at Lily. When Lily chose to continue the mission, he did not show any surprise, but just nodded lightly. Nodding and watching Lily slowly fall asleep, he stretched out his hand to hug her into his arms. With a flick of his sleeves, a figure wearing a bright yellow dragon robe slowly appeared, and finally stood in the starry sky. So that's it, the figure sighed after a while. He glanced at Lily and suddenly laughed. No wonder I like it so much. It turns out that I have already liked it. Since you are already so fascinated, it must be very interesting to watch this farce. He walked towards Li Yangzi, his figure gradually turned into a transparent halo, and was finally absorbed into Li Yangzi's body. Li Yangzi lowered his head to look at Lily, and laughed softly. He hugged Lily tightly into his arms, lowered his head in a somewhat jerky manner, touched his lips to hers, and then slowly followed Lily. Disappeared into the starry sky. My good sister, you can't survive today anyway, so just do me a favor. When you get to Jiquan, I will definitely thank you. A soft but chilling female voice sounded. Lily only felt a fire burning below her waist and abdomen, and footsteps sounded, as if someone got up to go out, but did not hear the sound of the door closing. Lily forced herself to open her eyes, not caring to take in the thoughts in her mind. Memories, trembling while looking for water. Her mouth felt like it was being burned and was so dry. She stumbled out of bed and took a quick look at the room. She only saw that it was a very simple and clean house, with blue bricks on the ground and what seemed to be around her ears. You can still vaguely hear the sound of the bell ringing. The room is very spacious. There is a purple table with a teacup on it. As soon as Lily sees the water, she feels her heart burning more and more. She can't help but tremble when she steps forward. I took the cup and started pouring it. In the end, my hands were shaking too late, so I opened the lid of the teapot and started drinking. As soon as the water entered her mouth, a sweet fragrance rushed into her throat. Lily secretly screamed something bad. Although she spit the water back into the cup, she still swallowed a big mouthful. She cursed secretly and put the teapot in her hand on the table. As she threw it, her body became even hotter, and a wave of fire began to flow down her lower abdomen and to her limbs, making her eyes turn red. Lily heard her heartbeat beating like a drum in her ears. At this particularly quiet time, she vaguely seemed to hear footsteps coming. Lily knew what she looked like at this moment without even looking. She saw that the room was open. She got out of the room without thinking. There was a large pear forest outside. She couldn't see the direction clearly, so she started running forward along the clean stone path. She looked like she had been given an aphrodisiac. When she became Bahiguo, Lily had given herself such a drug once. Her reaction now was almost exactly the same as that then. Thinking of the one next to her ear just now. The voice sounded familiar to Lily, and the words Qin Beiyun came to her mind, but she didn't dare to accept the plot. There was no one around, and Lily was afraid of seeing anyone at the moment. She scurried around looking for water, but after just walking a few steps, her chest felt like it was on fire. This body seemed to be very weak, and her legs, she had only been running for a moment, but the pain was so painful that she couldn't even move forward. Lily was a little anxious now, and her throat seemed to be on fire. She must have a man to deal with this stupid argument after taking aphrodisiac. If you don't believe it, as long as there is a lot of cold water to get her through, nothing will happen to her. It's just that the discomfort in her body is making her mind gradually become confused, and Lily is starting to doubt whether she can survive this body. The water source is there. If the water source cannot be found due to lack of physical strength, the aphrodisiac still dies on the way. This mission will be really ridiculous. Not only will the task not be completed, but he will also die in a very dishonorable way. Just as she was confused, someone grabbed her wrist and picked her up. There was no one around just now, but now someone suddenly came. Lily was very surprised. She subconsciously wanted to shake the person away, but her whole body was limp and powerless. She even actively wrapped her hands around the person's chest. In front of her, when Lily tried to open her eyes, she saw Li Yangzi's familiar face appearing in front of her. Except that his dress was slightly different from that of the starry sky, and he still had a sword hanging on his body. Lily almost wanted to. I thought I was no longer on task at this time. Li Yangzi. She gritted her teeth and gasped. Seeing how her face was flushed, Li Yangzi nodded seriously, glanced around, and quickly hugged her and hid in the room. In a rockery cave surrounded by pear trees. The mission this time is a bit complicated. I didn't have time to tell you, so I came here to tell you in person. He hugged Lily tighter, and the body in his arms leaned against him weakly and bonelessly. Lily estimated that without realizing it, her eyes were already misty, and now she instinctively stretched out her hand to touch Li Yangzi's chest. Li Yangzi calmly caught one of her groping hands in his arms. Her body was so hot that her cheeks seemed to be burning, her eyes were moist, her lips were bitten tightly, rapid breathing came from her nostrils, and big beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Do you accept the plot? Li Yangzi saw that her legs were so weak that she could not stand, so he hugged her tighter and lifted her up. Lily was already at the point where reason and instinct were struggling. I couldn't bear being hugged by him like this. If I hadn't gritted my teeth with all my strength and heard the word mission, I might have been able to throw him down by now. I don't know who gave her such a heavy dose of medicine. When she finds the opportunity, she will definitely repay it 1,000 times. Cursing in her heart, Lily shook her head with difficulty. Lily felt that she couldn't listen to what Li Yangzi said next. Her eyes fell on Li Yangzi's slightly opened lips, and she swallowed subconsciously. If it were someone else, she was still a little wary, but it was Li Yangzi, a familiar person. She couldn't help but put her backhand on his shoulder, and tried hard to climb up. Logically speaking, in her current state, even if she could crawl, it should be impossible to climb on Li Yangzi, but he seemed to give her a hand. Lily didn't pay attention to what he just did. Once her goal was achieved, she subconsciously hugged Li Yangzi's neck and moved her lips to him just now. The lips that kept talking touched her. Li Yangzi seemed a little surprised, standing still, and subconsciously asked, "What are you doing?" Thinking of his cold demeanor in the past, Lily couldn't help but feel guilty, but she soon put this guilt behind her mind. She grabbed Li Yangzi's collar tightly and held her body tightly. He pressed close to her, not noticing that while Li Yangzi was dodging, he was hugging her higher and higher to make it easier for her to move. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 381. The temperature in the narrow mountain wall was getting higher and higher, and the sound of chanting sutras was heard all around. Lily knew that she should stop, but a fire was boiling in her body, but she couldn't suppress it no matter what. Li Yangzi seemed to have been resisting. His hand seemed to be holding her hand tightly. Lily impatiently grabbed his hand and circled it behind her. She clamped his waist with her legs to stabilize her body. She stretched out her hand and started to pull up his clothes. There seemed to be a long sword hanging on his waist, which made her legs feel uncomfortable. She moved a little and let out 2 grunts. After a while, she only heard one sound, with the clanging sound of the long sword hitting the ground. Li Yangzi's clothes were easily torn apart, revealing a large piece of his strong chest. Lily reached out to touch her, and Li Yangzi seemed to reach out to push her again, but Lily's back pressed against the cave at some point, and he couldn't push her away at all. Lily's heart filled with a little joy, and he had already dispersed. The clothes were pulled up to his shoulders, and finally his hands dropped weakly. In the sound of neat chanting, Lily felt that Li Yangzi seemed to want her to stop, but this sound not only failed to make her stop, but also made her heart feel like a fire was lit. She tried her best to hug Li Yangzi's neck and put her lips against his, using this intimate contact to swallow up the sound of pain that was about to escape her lips. There was a strange yet familiar feeling in her body. Lily's anxious and somewhat rude movements made her suffer a lot for the first time. Li Yangzi seemed to be forced and rushed in recklessly. Lily was in pain. Her legs wrapped around him tighter, and he seemed to want to retreat, but she didn't wait for him to leave. The fire burning in her body made Lily move forward like a self-torture. Painful solution to that weird feeling. Her body must be very delicate. But every time she took a breath and felt that she was about to faint, a moist and soft lips and tongue would always come close to each other, and as the saliva entangled her, she would always gain a little more strength. She could feel that she was going to Li Yangzi. She pushed her down and sat on the mountain wall, straddling him. Her body was so sore that it was unbearable, but that feeling was engraved in her bones again. It should be in this direction. Where did it go? A somewhat familiar and delicate female voice rang. Lily gritted her teeth desperately, fearing that she would be heard if she made any sound. Finally, she simply opened her mouth and bit Li Yangzi's chest. She couldn't bear to bite down hard, so she just rubbed it gently with her teeth, and then she came back again. Seeking hardship, she couldn't help but curl up her toes. Reason slowly returned. Lily didn't even dare to open her eyes now. Li Yangzi's originally crowned hair was now somewhat loose, and the jade crown was pinned loosely on top of his head. A few strands of fine hair were scattered on his forehead, and his clothes were half undressed and very messy. He looked like someone who had been ravaged. He leaned against the mountain wall with his head lowered. A face that was too delicate to look like a real person showed a bit of sadness, and his cheeks were a bit thin. Dizzy, her eyelids drooped to block the thoughts in her eyes. Her long eyelashes hung like fans under her eyelids. Her lips were pursed tightly. Instead of her usual aloof indifference, she showed a subtle and strange enchantment. Lily only felt that her body ached and her head hurt. After calming down, she felt so guilty that she was speechless. When she saw Li Yangzi just now, she just felt that an acquaintance was coming. She thought, he is always better than others. Now that he calmed down and saw the cold and aloof Li Yangzi in the starry sky being tortured into this state, fear came to Lily's heart again. She actually didn't mean it, but if she said this she didn't know what to say to Li Yangzi. The memories from before were still there. Lily remembered how she pushed him against the mountain wall, how she told him to shut up, how she thought about him this and that again. Her legs started to tremble. She didn't know at that moment why is she so crazy that she dares to do such a thing to Li Yangzi, and people have already said that she came to this world solely to remind her of her mission. Lily's lips trembled twice, and she leaned into Li Yangzi's arms, so stiff. It's awesome, some want to move but some don't dare. The footsteps outside echoed back and forth for a few times, then slowly faded away. Li Yangzi hugged her and said nothing, as if she had turned into a stone sculpture. Lily swallowed, neither daring to move nor dare to speak. She suddenly wanted to close her eyes and tilt her neck to pretend to faint, but Li Yangzi suddenly said quietly, "Just now, you." "I didn't mean it." Lily spoke subconsciously and explained anxiously, "I really didn't mean it. After entering this mission, I couldn't control myself." But after saying this, Li Yangzi fell into silence again, and tears welled up in Lily's eyes. "I will be responsible." Really, Li Yangzi seemed a little disbelieving, and also seemed like someone who had been hurt. There was a bit of self-deprecation in his tone. "It's just a mission, forget it." "It's not a mission, It's true, Lily's initial plan was to pass it off on the pretext that it was a mission, but when Li Yangzi said this, she felt a little embarrassed again, so she nodded hurriedly, it's true. Originally I wanted to remind you that this mission might be a bit troublesome, but I didn't expect. Li Yangzi saw her lowering her head and not daring to look at him. He hugged her and sat on the ground, with Lily nestled in his arms. When she heard this, she felt a little guilty again. Thinking of the horrible things she had done before, she bravely hugged Li Yangzi and said, "No need to say it, it's true. I'm really sorry for you, this time it's my fault, I will take responsibility." Li Yangzi nodded and turned his face away. There was a bit of sadness and a bit of loss on his delicate cheeks. Originally, this time I just borrowed an identity to enter the mission to explain this to you. If the situation is like this now, I may not be able to go back for the time being. The more he said this, the more embarrassed Lily felt. She had been drugged when she entered the mission inexplicably. This time, not only did she suffer, but she also touched Li Yangzi. Fortunately, it was him. If it had been someone else, and he was not in the starry sky, Lily did not dare to think about what would happen if she met someone else, and what happened to Lu Jianli again. Thinking about it, she felt that although she had taken advantage of Li Yangzi, it's a bit troublesome, but at least it's better than others. I'm sorry. Lily didn't know how to comfort him. If she had been raped by him, she would still be crying and fussing, but now it was someone else who was taking advantage, and she was the perpetrator. At that time, Lily didn't dare to let herself go even though she felt pain all over her body. She coaxed Li Yangzi for a while, and even took her own clothes to wipe the sweat on his forehead, looking very caring. Appearance. It doesn't matter, I'll send you back first, you can accept the memory, and we can talk about the future later. The more Li Yangzi behaved like this, the more guilty Lily felt. While she put on her clothes silently, she couldn't help but turn around and emphasize. One sentence, I will really take responsibility. Li Yangzi, who was getting dressed with his back to her, stiffened, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. In the dim light of the mountain wall, a dark and inexplicable look of satisfaction flashed in his eyes, and then he quickly regained his composure and nodded. I know. The two of them were properly dressed, and Li Yangzi picked up Lily, who was standing up on the mountain wall. Lily's body stiffened for a moment, and then she thought about what she had promised him before, and that she had done such an excessive thing to him. She forgave herself easily, and now she was hugged by him. Although Lily felt a little uncomfortable, she did not resist and quietly allowed him to send her back to the previous wing. She originally had other things she wanted to do again. When asking him, there was a sound of footsteps outside. Li Yangzi only had time to gently put her on the bed, and quickly jumped out of the wide open window of the room, disappearing from Lily's sight. He just said that he wanted to talk to himself about something related to the plot. Before he could say anything, Lily moved her lips. The footsteps outside were getting closer and closer. She pretended to be asleep and closed her eyes. With his eyes closed, he felt a group of people entering the room, and a delicate voice said in a tight voice, "Mom, the eldest sister should be asleep at the moment." What could happen? A woman snorted coldly, "Lily is also the eldest daughter of my uncle's house. How dare you leave the wing unguarded? You're too lax. I'll deal with you after I return home." Lily only felt a group of people entering the room, and a sound of air conditioning suddenly sounded. Although she did not open her eyes, she could feel that the person making the sound of air conditioning should be the girl who called her eldest sister before. "Mom prayed for the peace charm for you. I just hope that you can survive these 18 tribulations smoothly, and your life will be smooth, and I will be satisfied." The female voice that was so powerful before became gentle now. Reached out and stroked Lily's hair, whispered in her ear, kissed Lily on the forehead, and straightened her clothes. When she felt this movement, Lily couldn't help but stiffen. She had a guilty conscience and was afraid that others would find out the clues. But fortunately, the woman didn't make any more movements. She just sat for a while and then let people go. After disturbing Lily's sleep again, she led a group of people out and went out. Before leaving, Lily only felt a strange gaze falling on her. She didn't let out a long sigh of relief until the sound of the door being closed sounded. There was no one around her now. Although the previous pain still remained in her body, Lily still closed her eyes and began to absorb the plot this time. She wanted to catch the woman who drugged her and eat it herself. She must repay such a big loss well. To be continued.